Mr. Or Senator Vice Speaker, Vice Speaker Calvo, you're recognized.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go back to where I left off yesterday, and then this is in regards to the bill that has been sent over by the governor. And let's go back into what the category where the administration wishes to make the adjustment. Again, with the administration's bill, the original number for federal resources, a dollar figure that was ratified in 2902, was $59,329,029, correct? In fact, Bertha, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Again, going back to last week's budget hearings and the representations and presentations put out by yourself and the administration, what currently now is the number that the administration is looking towards in collections when it comes to federal sources? And I'm saying taking out the $21 million that has just recently been provided to the government of Guam.
Collections would be 50 tracking as of May actuals. Federal sources is tracking 51,909,541, Mr. Chairman.
So with the number of 51,909,348, and 348, which you're representing today, as well as what you represented last week, and comparing it, what number was ratified in 2902, 59,329,029, which number would be the more accurate number?
The number, the adopted number of 59 is now tracking 51,909,541, so that would be the more accurate number.
Okay. Then the question I have for the administration, when you sent over the bill, and with this bill you have, again, the amendment where you delete the 59,329,029, and you add on the $21 million, and of course with that we come with a number of $80 million. Why did not the administration make the adjustment rather than 59 plus 21?
Okay.
Why did you have not 51 plus 21?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I was coming from the fact that the amendment to law would have to mirror what was already adopted. In the deliberations yesterday, I realized that you were correct, and it is correct to perhaps make an adjustment or change that number to net the 7.4 million that it's tracking downward.
If the legislature were to ratify the bill as presented by the administration, what would be the effect of again ratifying the $80 million, 504, 778, and 35-cent dollar number?
Without changing the departure number of 59 million?
Yes, I mean right near you're looking at line 13, federal resources, and you've deleted 59,329,029 and replaced it with 80,504,778 and 35 cents. Now the administration sent this number over as a new revenue figure for federal sources. If this was ratified, what would have occurred as is?
As is, what would have occurred would probably be an inflated number for federal sources. But as I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, I acknowledge that in preparing that particular section of the bill, I was just coming from making the adjustment up 20 million, and didn't take into consideration that the tracking was lower. In deliberations yesterday, Speaker Forbes also asked for us to come back with a revised the revised projections overall for the month with the actuals for the month of May that's available, and we have done that. So we're prepared to present that to the body this morning.
Yeah. So the administration, again, in error, sent over this bill with a overstated base number for federal sources, and the net effect, of course, would have been an overstating of revenues and an overstating of appropriations.
That's correct, sir.
So would you?
I acknowledge my mistakes.
So would there be a?
But
so,
where I was coming from was just,
yes,
you
okay.
know, I just took what was adopted,
Sure.
and I didn't realize that because the tracking has already shown a decline in that category.
And that, I think, is that's why I want, and the reason why I'm asking these questions is obviously we do not want to be put in a situation where what we ratify as revenue sources, once this legislature passes this measure, and then, of course, if we go into the appropriation phase and allocate this spending, it would lead to, again, an increasing or ballooning of the deficit, correct?
That's
so,
correct.
So
and
with
I
that,
appreciated the deliberation yesterday because it brought to light the fact that perhaps every category needs to be adjusted, and that's what we're prepared to present this morning.
so in light of this error and in light of the readjustment in the numbers, would you not recommend an amendment that would take into consideration the overstatement of the original revenue picture for federal sources, and then, of course, making that amendment
I
to
would
correct
recommend.
that?
Yes.
Okay. And with that, again, I just want to be very clear in this. This is the reason why I'm proffering an amendment, and the amendment, again, is based on the revenue hearings of last week, based on the current projections for federal sources, and with that, adding on the additional $21 million.
Yes.
And of course, it would be a net effect of lowering your total by about $7.4 million. So with that, I'm going to.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm going to offer this amendment based, on the statements that have been made over the past week and yesterday's hearings. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer this amendment.
The amendment's passed out yet?
Mr. Chairman, would we have the opportunity to present the updated revenue numbers, because that would have a bearing on the offset of the $7 million that now is taken with this amendment?
Again, the chairman's there, but for me as a senator that is now speaking, obviously, there are many questions that have brought forth, especially regarding the tax amnesties as well. So yeah, again, the legislature would, when I as a senator, again, proffering this amendment and listening to the testimony of the administration, would obviously love to, like to understand the new revenue calculations put forth by the administration. I would say that if many adjustments are made and ultimately the same number that the administration is looking at towards in terms of appropriation authority, if that number is quite coincidentally identical to what originally was started out and what ended up, but the subtotals change and vary, obviously that would be one heck of a coincidence. But again, I look forward to again the presentation by members of the administration.
Okay, on the Calvo amendment. Senator Barnes.
Mr. Chair, I just asked, just based on the statements done by Ms. Bertha, she said that she's got some adjusted revenues, and there's an amendment on the floor here. I just feel that it's important that we look at the adjusted documents that you just noted before we work on this amendment.
I agree, but I need to dispose of this amendment that's on the floor at this point, Senator Barnes. The amendment has been brought forth on the floor prior to.
But Mr. Chair, if I may, I was just informed that the adjustments would make a difference before this amendment is heard? Would there be a difference in
Mr. Chair,
adjusted numbers?
Mr. Chair, I must again advise the senator that there is only one revenue figure that has been brought forward to this body, and that is federal sources. There has been a statement made by this administration last week in budget hearings, and again reiterated in yesterday's hearing. This is all factual, and particular to federal sources. I, as the author of this amendment, has no problem with the senator that is addressing the chairman, that if there are other categories, then those she has the microphone and has the opportunity to address those categories. And obviously the administration has made statements to the effect that there will be adjustments in other areas. But in particular to federal resources or sources, this is the object of this amendment, and there is concurrence. All that has been written in this amendment is based on the presentations made by the administration.
Then I object to the. I call for a vote.
Okay.
So,
Senator Mpingo, did you have your hands? No. Okay. Okay.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my point of information here basically is that before we even make a vote, before we call for the vote, normally what we as a body would like to do is to get more information so that we can decide how we're going to vote. And if there's information that can be presented to us, then I would like to hear those prior then to making a vote. Otherwise, I really can't take a position on how am I going to vote until I get all the facts. And that's what we've always been asking, was factual information. And so I ask, Mr. Chairman, if you can go ahead and rule and allow Ms. Duenas to give us the information. And then we can vote.
Senator Specia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on the amendment, and I understand there's been a call for the vote. You know, I also am following the administration's updated revenue forecast for fiscal year 2007, particularly at the revenue hearing that the acting BBMR presented to the legislature. And the chairman should know that we not only need to make an adjustment in federal sources, but in the individual category, it's gone down from 60.8 million to 54 million. In the corporation, it's gone up from 61 million to 72.1 million. In the withholding and penalty, it's gone up from 155,000.1 to 157. So obviously, there's other adjustments that need to be made. And when I wrote a letter to the acting BBMR director, first thing yesterday morning, I asked her to come prepared to the legislature to give the legislature an update on the revenue projections. And I'm particularly concerned about the revenue that we booked for all these fees for the departments and agencies. And so rather than piecemealing this, I think we should have an opportunity to have an overview, which is what should have been done from the very beginning, establish what the revenue projection is going to be for this fiscal year, and then proceed to address the $21 million monies from the RRS. So I believe there was a call for a vote.
Senator Cabo?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I understand again, and I'm listening to some of the viewpoints by members of the legislative body. I have no problem at this point allowing for further discussion and listening to the commentaries made by the administration. Again, these amendment that has been proffered is an amendment based on the facts of what have been presented to this legislative body. But if it is the wish of the legislature to withhold and if they're not ready to move on this particular amendment, then I have no problem with pulling it back. Though these numbers are numbers that are based on the passage of 2902, though these are numbers that are represented based on the statements made by members of the administration on last week, though these are numbers that are further reiterated yesterday by the administration, and though there's been an acknowledgement by the administration of the error in the bill that has been presented, I have no problem in pulling back the amendment. And of course, based on if the administration has other numbers make this body reconsider the numbers that have been provided by the administration, then all the better. So with that, I have no problem, and I'll pull back on this amendment till the proper time where it is appropriate to proffer the amendment.
Okay, on Senator Calvo's withdrawal of his amendment, any objections? Passes. Senator Ompinko?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad, though, that there's a cooperative attitude here. And I like to commend, the administration, too, at the same time, especially Bertha, for, being upfront on, the projection that we have. Because we need to have a straight talk like what we're doing right now. And it's very refreshing, to see that there is some, tone of understanding, standing in terms of, the panel up there and us. So, if you don't mind, maybe give us a scenario in terms of what you have, in terms of the recommendation that the administration may have right now.
Thank you, Senator. If I'd like to ask the chair if we could get copies of what I am going to be discussing this morning with regard to the revenue update.
We'll take a 1-minute recess for copies to be copied and distributed.
Back in order, and again, a request was made for the administration to make a presentation on revenues and adjusted revenues. So with that, I'll just afford the microphone to Ms. Bertha Duenas. Bertha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that everybody has the right copies to follow. There's the long spreadsheet, which is the updated tracking spreadsheet. There are the combined comparative statement of revenues for April, May, and June. And then you should have a summary sheet that summarizes the whole exercise. March, April, and May. And then we have the single sheet that shows the summary of the exercise. Those are the ones that have the columnar and row designations of 1 through 46 and A through H. I will just go ahead and explain the summary sheet. I'll begin with that. The detail sheets are going to be needed as we go along to validate the summary sheet. Okay, as you can see, column D represents the adopted revenues in Public Law 2902, which is self-explanatory. But on row 20, column D, we have the baseline tracking for columns E and F, which is, column E is an extrapolation of Public Law 2902 without the revenue enhancements. Column F is the baseline tracking and adjustments based on actual collections through May. So in the first, the upper portion of the summary, when you go to column 20, row 20, column D is really, column D's 458 is not a tracking because it includes the amnesties as projected in Public Law 2902, which is the 30 million, 25 on top and 5 million under real property and line row 28. However, I want to call to the attention of the body column E and F. E and F are columns E and F are the baseline revenue tracking for between the period. Column E is actuals collected up through February, and column F is the update, which we updated last night, and that is up to May. Continuing, as you can see on row 29, it shows the adopted general fund revenues for column D is 469,346,347. The additional revenues is then carried down under column F, which is the May update, and that brings the baseline tracking of 434 to 440. Then on row 39, we have the collection anomalies that were added back after the tracking exercise. So, for example, column E, the tracking is showing 428 million after you take out the revenue enhancements, so that when you go down to rows 31 through 38, you have a cumulative from the tracking of 428 adding on the anomalies, which are specific to additional child tax credit reimbursements that we received in October, January, May, and the remaining reimbursement that we project to receive for the balance of the fiscal year, for a total of about $8 million in ACTC reimbursement. Again, these were taken out of the tracking exercise because it would have given an artificial inflation to that revenue category, which would not be accurate in the process of projection.
Bertha?
Yes, sir.
In the other fiscal years, have we had, and I know we've had this, the refundable portion of the additional child tax credit has always been reimbursed by the federal government, beginning in, I had these discussions when I went to Washington, D.C., actually, and I met with Steve, and it was after that there was an MOU signed between the Department of Revenue and Taxation and the IRS that they would, in fact, give us the refundable portion, pay us the refundable portion that we pay out of the additional child tax credit. So these really are not anomalies to the federal sources, because they've always been since that. And I think my trip to Washington may have been like six years ago. So they've never been anomalies, is what I'm saying, because for the last 6 years we've always gotten these reimbursements, if I'm not mistaken.
It's always been treated as an anomaly, and yes, that's a good point. We could always restore it as not an anomaly. From a conservative standpoint, I felt that, well, it's been treated that way in the tracking exercise, so I just accepted it as probably also a conservative approach. But of course, Senator, that's something that we can discuss and perhaps not treat as an anomaly going forward. But it has always been treated as an anomaly, not just this time.
This is the first time we've been told, at least I've been told, that it's an anomaly.
Yes, I know.
I don't think in any other budget exercise that I've participated in.
It has been treated as such, but it's just never been told. Yeah.
Wink, wink. Okay. Thank you.
Can
Okay,
you, Bertha? Can you, Bertha, Tony and Pinko?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can you just since we've been using the word anomaly for the general public that's listening right now, can you just define what anomaly means?
Out of the ordinary collections that are not going to be repeated in the normal course of things, and that's what lends credence to the senator's comments. It could be viewed as, that this having recurred over the last few years, which probably should be taken out, that definition may not apply So that is certainly being taken into consideration. But yes, anomaly means collections that are not a part of the normal stream of revenues that recur on a consistent basis.
But what Senator Ben Pangilinan was saying is that we, for the last several years, we've been receiving reimbursement, though, right, from the child credit?
Yes, yes, yes,
so
Senator.
I guess then,
Perhaps Art can add to this discussion. Art?
yes, so Mr. Logan?
ACTC is that reimbursable part of the child tax credit, I believe, that we get back from IRS. Prior to us coming in, I think it was never taken out as an anomaly until we were looking at the issue of getting it and reporting it in our revenue statements. And I think in the past we were wondering what happened. How do we report this thing in the revenue source? So I think that issue was discussed with Lou in the beginning of our administration, how to report this. And I think back then too, when this thing started to be refunded to us, it was probably an issue of how to show it with all the other prior years of not showing it in the past, to show a jump in a spike in the revenues for that year. And I think at that time it was probably considered not normal.
So
or a
okay.
spike that would
So every
affect
time we
future
receive this reimbursement, Art, we have never then taken into consideration that this might be a slush fund, right? That could be used in terms of
No, we've
additional
right.
cash,
I
because we
get-
have taken this thing out from the general fund already,
right,
right? So we have paid it,
right.
but we never sort of put this thing in as far as the budget is concerned.
Yes, it has been. If you look at the spreadsheet, it's something. It looks like this. It always in the bottom of the sheet, it will show you all the anomalies that happen through the year. I don't have that sheet with me, but there is a sheet that we pass out in the other revenue hearings. It looks something like this with the forecast and for the year. Do we have a copy of that?
Yeah. In terms of where you will see it in the previous revenue reports that Department of Administration sends out on a monthly basis, it used to be reported under Federal Sources Section 30, but after discussions with the auditors, they felt it was not really Section 30. So they moved it. It was at their recommendation that we moved it from under Federal Sources Section 30 back up to revenues, because it really is when taxpayers apply for this credit, it comes right back to us. So that's really that's really general fund revenue. That's considered.
Yeah. Okay, I'm glad that you admit that that's the general fund revenue and it's not really a federal reimbursement. Well, yeah, it's a reimbursement, but it's not Section 30 money.
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay, moving on with the presentation, you will notice from rows 35 through 38 is the one that really was, I guess, in question yesterday, which is the 14 million of individual, corporate, and withholding tax anomalies for March and April that were taken out of the baseline tracking and added back. That's the 14 million that's reflected there. Then proceeding from rows 41 to 44, we reflect, of course, the income tax, GRT, and real property amnesty potential yield that we are now have adjusted from 6 to 9 million. Dave Santos Act amendment is still shown as adopted in 2902. The visible GRT is a revised estimate based on information more recently from revenue and tax, and of course the Section 30 reimbursement for prior years, it's 21 million. The bottom line, the revised revenue estimate sits at 496,261,435. I would like to take the body back to rows 4 through 19 and speak to the adjustments in individual, corporate, and withholding, of course, for income tax. I just want to again reiterate that column E is just an extension of Public Law 2902 in actuals up to February, and column F is actuals up to May. And they are based on 3 years collection experience as far as extrapolation for the remaining 4 months from June to September. Yes, sir.
Bertha, just real quick on the lines 35 to 38 in your individual corporate withholding of corporate anomalies. Was that prior to the amnesty?
I'm not sure. Was it prior?
Is
to
it prior to the amnesty kicking in? Because those
the
okay, the
anomalies
anomalies on line 35, 36, 37, 38. Those are okay. Individual, corporate, income, and corporate anomalies. Are those prior to?
Yes.
Those prior to the.
Well, we identified certain taxpayers that paid extra amounts because they did something
Okay.
during the year, so kind of took those out.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that they owe taxes, and this is included. I mean, the interest included in that. So this is prior to that. Prior to the.
Most of them were either estimated tax payments paid
Okay.
because they sold properties, and we identified there were large
Okay,
amounts. So
okay.
we kind of took those and separate those from the regular amounts that were coming in from the revenue source,
Okay.
so that we don't have a spike and expect that next
Okay.
year.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Now, I like to validate the 14 million because that was was in question yesterday. So if I could just take you to one of the items that comprise the 14 million, which is the individual tax anomaly. If you could reach for your March comparative revenue statement. Let me see March. Okay. On individual is recorded at the comparative revenue statement at 5,364,827. If you look at the tracking, which is the long sheet, and you look at March, you will find that it's a different number. The number is 3,363,690. The difference is the anomaly on line 35, which is 2,001,137. So you can see that the anomaly was taken out of the tracking experience, so that we can validate that adding it later was actually an exercise that could be done. Yes. Now, if you I can continue, but I'm sure you can follow the rest. Corporate tax for March. If you look at corporation under the revenue statement, it's showing 5,698,224. In the tracking, corporation is showing 8,511,442. And the difference is the 3,664,311 that is an anomaly in March, and
Art,
so on.
Yeah, Art, you mentioned that the increase in this collections was due to the application of the foreign tax on corporations. I thought, and correct me if I don't remember correctly, that the treatment of taxes on foreign corporations was changed from a 30% withholding to a 10% withholding based upon the amendment that Congressman Underwood was able to get to make us part of the tax treaties. So how did we collect this additional money under that scenario?
There was a transaction, a property sold during that period that required a deposit of that 10%. That 10% was a significant amount of monies that was deposited into our account, into Gov Guam. And it was based on the 10%. Yes, it was.
And we go before.
May I make a correction to a statement I just made? I was reading the wrong column on the corporation. Corporation for March is really 12,175,000. I was reading March 2006. I apologize. March 2007 is really 12,175,000, 761, and in the tracking it's reading 8,511,442, and that is net off the and that is because of the corporate anomaly on row 36, which is 3,664,319. I apologize for that error.
Okay,
Senator Pico?
I just wanted to clarify further whether have you taken into account also the interest payable to those people that will that have not received their income tax return for 2004, 2005?
I think that's Lou's. I think Lou has a certain way
Is
to
that
report interest.
taken into consideration here? How much we'll be paying?
You would find that under in our financial statements as accrued interest, and then the interest that we actually do pay out is expensed out as an unappropriated amount. You will see in the financial statements for interest paid on.
How much are we talking
refunds.
now, Art? Right now, the people that have their income tax return pending and have not received their tax refund, they're getting 7.5% or 8%.
I believe it's 1% below prime, which is 7. I think 8 is prime.
8.
Yeah.
So
So I
they'll
think
be
it's
getting 7%
Right.
right now.
Right. Yes, sir.
So that's a good investment for anybody, right?
Yes.
If you guys can find the cash to pay it. But my point though, is it taken into consideration here? Because you still have to pay it out. Just like the tax, refund account here that we're talking about. It needs to be computed in.
Right.
You're interested in the interest amount on those
Yes,
years?
the interest amount and how much interest payable for the year 2005 and 2006 that we have not paid yet.
Okay. Basically, there's two computations here. One is the ones that are actually processed already. We have roughly about $74.2 million of refunds that are pending, with an interest of roughly $36 million. This goes back from 2005 and all the way back to those unpaid interest, mainly on the corporate refunds.
What is the oldest refund that's not been paid?
The oldest?
Yeah.
I have to go back and check. But if I may say, if it goes back to like 2002, 2001, there's very minimal on those things when you're looking at those years. But the majority of it is 2005, 4, and you keep going back 3, 2.
But John, if the total tax owed is 74 million, and in 7% of 75 million over 2 years cannot equal 36 million.
If the majority of the tax is on corporate for example, it's 35.8 million right now, and it goes all the way back to the probably the late 90s, the mid 90s. It
That's-
may generate that much.
Okay, so the oldest tax return is, you're talking individual maybe is,
I'm talking about corporate. When
you're
you-
talking about total tax interest payable, corporate and individual.
That's
It's
only for the process side. I mean, we still anticipate on the unprocessed and unfiled returns.
And that would only be though for 2006 and maybe a few lags.
Right.
So the oldest, so the majority of them are would be on the individual side would be the 2005 2004, and then you have the corporate way, which may be, for example, your qualifying certificate recipients who are supposed to get paid rebated their tax. We have not rebated them. Is that part of this
No,
corporate
no, this-
income
no,
tax?
this is not
that a
part.
completely separate
Yes, this is separate.
new liability?
Yes, that's separate.
Okay, so you're saying that there's possibilities that corporate income taxes as late as 1999, 1994, 1995 are not paid?
That's correct.
Okay, they've been filed, they've been processed, they've been certified,
File process, yes.
and
And-
there's not a problem return at all. They're just sitting there.
Well,
'Cause
we have to say that there's some of them that are suspended or errors that are not basically
haven't been rectified.
rectified. Yes.
Okay. So the problem is a little bit bigger than we think on income taxes, and it's not that it's not smaller because it's a corporation. I mean, they earn the money, they paid their taxes, and they deserve a refund also. They could use that money to reinvest in their business for expansion, give their employees a raise, pay them maybe more than minimum wage, all of those things. But the fact is that there are these taxpayers out there that are not just 2005, 2002, 2003, but 1999, maybe 1994, maybe a few, but they're still, we're still a little bit much more behind than we think we are with regards to that. So, okay, that's just, I was just trying to reconcile when you said the majority of the returns are 2004, 2005, 2006 at 74 process returns, and interest owing is 36 million. I just couldn't reconcile that too without that additional information you just gave me.
If I just may add, that is the process section. The unprocessed and unfiled that you anticipated is basically 46.9 million, and the interest on that is a little bit smaller, which is 5.2. So if you recall back when we first wanted to borrow that bond, it was always like about $120 million on the refund side, not including interest. So if you really look at the 2005 aggregate, we're looking at about $121 million right now on the refund side, and roughly 41 million on the interest side.
Vice Speaker?
But John, we couldn't. Why are we borrowing money to pay unprocessed, unfiled tax returns? Why is the governor proposing? I mean, is the $120 million that he has sent down in his 2000? I know it's a little bit digressing, in his 2008 budget package. Is that just for the processed tax returns? Or is he saying that once everybody knows we have a bond, they're all going to process their tax returns or file their tax returns?
I
Okay.
think the bond, sir, the bond that we were looking at was to pay for the COLA primarily.
Oh, no.
The
It
250.
it
included income tax.
Yeah.
It did include income tax.
It included
refunds.
income
Right.
tax.
But those are for the ones we are kind of like waiting to pay out. The ones that
Okay.
have been processed and ready to go.
So those are.
Right.
But if you're telling me if those are the process and ready to go, it's only 110 million because 74 plus 36. I think the governor was asking 121 or income tax refunds. So an additional $10 million over and above what this number represents.
Sometimes when we get into these unprocessed or error returns, they come in with substantiation, and the refund goes up. So you have to account for some of those adjustments.
Well, I'm glad you're telling me that, because I would never have known that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Speaker?
Okay, thank you very much. Again, very interesting. You know, obviously, we have the spreadsheets that were presented by the administration last week, and of course, the spreadsheet that we've just received today. Minor differences, and obviously, within a week, there are changes that occur. So, I'm not going to make a big, haul about it. Minor adjustments. Taking note of the categories that are presented here, presented in the short sheet and the summary, and then just doing comparatives of, again, the presentation made to Standard & Poor's, as well as, again, that's where the issue of whether we're tracking in a 434 or a 454 number, $20 million. That $20 million just seems to always be the number that, bottom line, there is some issue that has been brought up again and again, and how things have changed from one week to the next. Now, again, I'm going to recall, by the way, where's Mr. Berdalio? He's on leave still? Okay. Again, if we can go through a chronological order of this baseline number. Obviously, Mr. Berdalio made a statement, and this was a public statement. The original concern that, of course, the legislature had in my committee, when there was this original tracking of around $450 million as a baseline. And of course, there were discussions with my office that week. And of course, the next week, he made a public presentation that we were tracking at $447 million. I'm sure you recall the public statement of $447 million. And then, about a week and a half to 2 weeks later, there was another statement going to this $434 million baseline tracking on revenues. And again, this is what the legislature was led to believe in those many, many weeks we spent in deliberating in Bill number 74. Then, of course, again, this is just reiteration of what was discussed yesterday. There was the passage and the signature by the governor of Bill 74 into Public Law 2902. And, of course, if you can recall again, there was an assertion made by Mr. Berdalio after the budget session that baseline tracking was at 454. And of course, I do note that based on the presentation to Standard & Poor's and of course the presentation made to the legislature, we have this baseline tracking of 454. Then I do take note, and again, very little discrepancies in the individual categories on your baseline. And bottom line, it adds up, based on your 3-year trends and what you're tracking, that your baseline tracking is at 434. Then, of course, little bit of a complication as I try to compare this short form and the form provided to us by the administration in regards to what they saw were the current revenue tracking. And I note that, you have the base tracking of 454. And here, of course, I look at your baseline tracking of 434. Then it goes to the individual categories of, again, individual income tax, 54 million, corporate, 71.7 million, withholding tax, 160 million, provisions for refunds, again, 75.60. Everything seems to be in jibing here. Gross receipts tax, 162. Then, of course, and F, you have the additional revenues. Things are, except for that $20 million discrepancy between this short form and what was presented to Standard & Poor's and to the legislature at 454, everything seems to be in line, except for the amnesty program listed was $6 million. But obviously things have changed, and we found out that it's $9 million here. So I see that. The Dave Santos amendment, 2.33333. Okay, that is in line. The visible GRT, there's a discrepancy, not a whole lot, but again, with the GRTs, the visible taxes shown by the administration Standard & Poor's at the time was estimated at $2 million. Here is showing $1.3 million. And then, of course, you have the Section 30 reimbursement for prior years of $21,175,749. Now, this is just, again, going back at the anomalies. If you were to add all the, again, what the administration has represented as anomalies, and whether it's on the child tax credit, which, again, there's wink, wink, as people have mentioned earlier, has always been a part of the revenues projections because it has been consistent over the years. And you add up the tax credits of child tax credits, 1.649, 2.102, 1.688349, 2.559977. You add all that up, and then you add up the anomalies. This is interesting because in the interpretation of what an anomaly is and an aberration, they're outside the normal. And again, that's based on maybe you're looking at there was a major capital gain, and whether it's a corporate or individual. Withholding tax anomaly, that's interesting because, withholding taxes, there's been this trend going downward. We were very concerned on withholding taxes. And you look at the anomaly in withholding taxes where you take out $4.7 million in withholding taxes because maybe there's maybe there was a short term for some folks that are only working maybe this year, and maybe they won't be here next year. So they're obviously that's actually, that kind of, I scratch my head on that one too, because withholding taxes, you would think there wouldn't be these anomalies because there is a workforce and it is a deduction on the paychecks every 2 weeks. So again, you look at withholding and you see the trends that were relatively flat, but still there was an anomaly that you shouldn't take into consideration in your baseline. And then you go into corporate. Okay, what did I talk? You have corporate, withholding, individual. Now, obviously, we're not here the fiscal policy team, and there must be reasons for what you consider an aberration or anomaly. I must say that if you add up all what the administration considers anomalies, it quite coincidentally hits $22 million. Give or take $1 million. Quite coincidentally, the tracking of 454 as opposed to 434 is around the $21, $22 million. So obviously, again, I'm not going to be the expert on what were considered anomalies and aberrations. But if these were, and let's just say the trends that have been going over this past year will change to maybe in June. Maybe in June, the anomalies will not show up. Maybe July, maybe August. So the anomalies will be anomalies and aberrations. And with that, I can understand a $434 million baseline. Obviously, in the presentation made to Standard & Poor's, the baseline, I consider, or maybe Mr. Berdalio considered the baseline, maybe those anomalies and aberrations were not anomalies or aberrations. Maybe this is why we're seeing, again, I understand, but quite coincidentally, these anomalies and aberrations kind of fit almost perfectly into this $20 million difference. And of course, when we add up this $20 million difference, we see where your numbers are pretty much in line. Again, you know, these are representations by the administration. Now, as we move forward, I'm wondering, just what are your your baseline projections for fiscal year 2007? You're predicting again, what is that? Oh, 434.
But baseline tracking, sir, as of May actuals is the 434.5.
And you're predicting that, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
of course, if you were to have those anomalies added in there and the tax credit, it would go up to 450, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Just getting an understanding. Now, how do we look for June? I don't see June here. In fact, we just received your June numbers. My office, I want to thank BBMR. Where are we projecting? What do we have on June numbers? And obviously, you know, we have June and we have July. And of course, I understand there are many things that have occurred. The amnesty. So, what do June numbers show? Okay, let's go. If we get the year-to-dates, I'm sorry, folks. Maybe what I should do is get copies of June. But let's just go for in general fund.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask, is it the report that we do, the monthly comparative reporting?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Oh, no, this.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman, can we have copies?
Sure,
of
let me
that?
get a copy.
Please,
I want to take a few minute recess just to get a copy.
1 minute recess.
Call to order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8. And Judy got theirs.
We got it.
Senator Rory, thank you. Okay, thank you, Senator Simisu. Now the committee of the whole is now called to order. Senator Calvo, you're recognized.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, Mr. Chair, we left off before lunch. Again, I requested a copy of the June financial, or there was a request for the copy of the June financials. So it's been passed out to the members of the body. And then we're doing a comparative analysis of revenues put out by the administration. And so I'm just going to go over these categories. But I'm going to do it in the order of 2902, just because I've always wondered why that is. You have in all the spreadsheets, you always start out with individual and then corporate tax. But when you have it on the actual public law, it's the corporate side, then the individual. So let me just go in the order of how it is in the bill. Again, we ratified in 2902 a revenue figure for corporate income tax at $61,491,271. Now, I'm not going to try to interpret what is an aberration, what is a normal standard anomaly, not aberration, anomaly. But if you take a look at what you are now tracking at corporate, there is a 71 million. What is that? Why don't you just, in fact, why don't we have the administration stated? What are you tracking on corporate income tax?
Tracking is 71,757,890.
Okay. So even with taking into consideration or taking out the anomaly, you're up by about 10,266 over what was ratified in 2902, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's add in the anomaly. So you add in the anomaly of 3,664,319. What does that come up to? The grand total corporate? Add the
I need my calculator.
add the anomaly plus the corporate. Somewhere close to 80, I think. 70.
Good. Can we just second recess so that?
Okay.
Okay. Are you following Senator Calvo, Bertha?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. And Mr. Chair, the reason for why I'm asking these questions, obviously there was some concern yesterday when the administration put out the assertion that the amnesty was again ratified at $30 million in 2902, but in actuality what was received was $9 million. And also there was statements made by the administration that the federal sources was not at 59 million at what was ratified, but more at 51.9. So again, my concern was, oh my goodness, we're going in the wrong direction. So that's why now I'm trying to see how things are going to reconcile here. So again, Bertha, have you done the calculation there?
Yes. The corporate, based on actuals through May, is 71.7, and I added in the two anomalies that are presented on the bottom of 3,664,319 plus the corporate anomaly in March and April, 4 million. The sum is 79,422,209.
So either way, if you took in the base tracking, and then you're up, but if you were to take into consideration these anomalies, then you're up by what is that? Close to $18 million.
Yes.
That's substantial. Any care to comment on this? I'm just saying you're looking at about an $18 million.
Senator, the baseline tracking for corporate is the 71.7, and so the anomalies are total 7,664,319 for 79 point something.
Bottom line, this is a substantial increase. You're looking from what we projected and what we ratified based on your tracking and taking into consideration anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't take into consideration anomalies, you're looking at substantial.
Well, just the baseline is 17%.
Yeah. And with the anomaly, you're looking at close to 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to go to June. And I want to, again, that was provided to everyone here. Just for the month of June, what did we collect for corporate income taxes in the month of June this year?
Well, according to the draft that was given to the committee in one of the reporting requirements, it's 15,909,650.
Mm-hmm. Now compare that with the previous year, June.
Previous year, June was 6,814,331, or an increase of 9 million.
Yeah. So you're looking at over 100% increase in collections in corporate.
150%.
150%. And obviously, there must be reasons for that. So, Art,
Is the reason for that?
there has been a substantial increase
150% increase.
in June. And that's interesting because you threw out a $9 million in amnesty. So when you look at the corporate, when you're looking at corporate collections for income tax, last year 6.8 million, this year 15.9. That's a 150% increase. How much of that would be baseline? How much would be baseline? How much would be amnesty? Mike, you know what? We have some bad audio here. Do you mind if you turn that on?
Right now, we're trying to get the numbers, sort out the numbers by category in our office. It's still done manually
Sure.
within my collection branch.
Okay.
And also Lou probably in the treasurer's office probably collected
Yeah.
some amnesties through her department. So we need to marry those two together to find an amount that we can categorize as corporate, individual,
Sure.
withholding, and GRT.
I guess the interesting point here, at least for the corporate side, and whether you're talking base tracking or you're talking anomalies, if you take into consideration the month of June, I don't anticipate you'll see any reduction. And whether you look at the baseline of 17% increase or take into consideration anomalies of 30%, but in actuality there will be even a greater percentage in what you would say the increase in corporate income tax as opposed to what was originally ratified in 2902, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. You're speaking to the increase just in the actuals between February and May.
Yeah.
There's already a trend of 17% without the anomalies.
Okay.
So you're absolutely right.
Okay, now let's
What is that?
let's go into individual income tax collections. We ratified again on 2902 the figure of 60,863,748, correct?
That's correct.
You're tracking at what number now?
54,232,450, but
Okay.
that does not include the anomalies, which
What is the anomaly?
well, 8 million with additional child tax credit
Plus the
and
2 million.
2 million.
So what would that equal to? If you added all those anomalies into the picture.
64,233,587.
So if, and again, I'm not going to question what is a baseline and what's anomalies, but if you take into consideration the anomalies, then you're showing 64 million
64,233,587.
and we ratified 60,863,748.
That's correct.
So you're seeing an increase of about a little bit over $3.3 million in the individual income tax category, correct?
Yes, but where I would caution, Mr. Chairman, is that we haven't identified what portion of that may be the amnesty.
Sure.
And the baseline tracking is still showing a decline of 11%.
When was the give me the dates of the amnesties. When was the deadline for I know there was a different time for property tax and for income tax, wasn't there?
The amnesty period for income tax was from April 26th to June 26th. The real property tax was from April 9th to July 9th.
Okay. So everything should have been taken into consideration by at least by June.
Yes, it should have.
And based on your statistics, again on May, you're still obviously there's an increase because of this anomaly, but what you're saying, Bertha, is that you don't know what the breakdown in amnesty or not.
That's right.
I do recall, but that there were some concerns when we had a hearing not too long ago that the amnesty program was not, we were way. In fact, it wasn't 9 million. There was a figure much lower than that, and it's. I think what was that?
It was like probably closer to 4.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
see, but that was before the end of the period. You see, at the cycle,
Sure.
people come in at the last period.
See, which leads me to believe again that we're going to have a breakdown. If we can have a breakdown on the amnesty, there will be an apportionment, maybe a little bit in May, but probably the majority in June.
I would think that's
Yeah.
a safe assumption.
So, but taking that into consideration, you're seeing growth in the individual income tax. If you take into consideration these anomalies, now you go into June. Now, June individual income tax collections were what? Again, these are all draft numbers.
Income tax, total income tax?
Individual income tax is collected in the month of June.
Yeah, individual is 6,076,000.
Okay.
663. It appears that there was also a close to 100% increase. On
Yeah,
that one.
that's what I was going to ask you the question. What was the collections of June of last year?
It's 3.3. It's 3,494,856.
So you're seeing in the month of June, again, bearing in mind that already in May we're seeing, if you take into consideration anomalies, growth, at least when it comes to the amount that was ratified in 2902, we're seeing about 100%, a little bit over 100%. Is it 100%?
No, it's 73%.
Okay, 73% growth for the month of June. So again, I'm going to ask you that question. Even with the anomaly, if you do take into consideration the anomalies, we are already tracking about $3.3 million above what was ratified for individual income taxes, as was ratified in 2902. Correct? Yeah, 64 million. 64 million 233. When you add the anomalies, correct? And with the month of June, again, when you're talking 73% growth, I would assume then that if you put in the month of June, you're not going to see actually a reduction or a downward trend. You're going to see an even more accelerated upward trend, correct?
That will all depend, Mr. Chairman, of course, and on how much of that is amnesty. See, at this point, we cannot isolate amnesty, so I would be very cautious about.
Sure.
Yeah.
At this point, what we do know, when you total up all individual income tax collections and you project forward, your tracking now is at again using the anomalies, $64 million, 233,587.
That's correct.
Okay, and we ratified 60,863,748.
That's correct.
And this does not include the month of June, where we have 73% increases in individual income tax, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's go to withholding taxes. Withholding is interesting. Withholding is interesting. You are currently tracking what number on withholding?
Tracking 160,103,941.
Okay, what was adopted in 2902?
Adopted is 155,143,393.
And so you're showing an increase in base tracking of, well, how much?
3%.
3%.
Or about 5 million.
5 million. And of course, this is always interesting. The anomaly of withholding you add that into it. What is the anomaly total?
The anomaly in we
March
are in
2000.
withholding is 4.686465, and that would bring that category 259,829,858.
You would have, what would it be?
4,000,006, row 37 of the summary sheet.
So 4,686,465.
That's correct, for an a tracking of 159,829.
No, you're tracking. Aren't you tracking 100 and?
55. I'm sorry.
No. You're 160.
160, 103, 941.
Yeah, you are already up on tracking by about almost $5 million base tracking. So if you add the anomaly,
Okay, I'm
that
sorry.
would be.
I was taking the adopted, so it's
Yeah.
160, 103, 941 plus the 4,686,465 is 164,790,
Yeah.
406.
Now we ratified 155,143,393,
Wait.
and now you're at 164,790,406. That's nearly. That's almost $10 million, correct? What is it? What is the increase from projection from what?
We're actually short because we projected 13 and we only collected 10
Which one?
for withholding.
Oh, for which
June.
month? Month of June?
Yes.
Oh no, I'm talking about the. I haven't gone to June yet. I'm
Okay.
going on the tracking that you're showing here.
Okay.
So your baseline tracking for withholding taxes, and you include the provision for, the anomaly.
Yes.
If you didn't include the anomaly, you're already up tracking by $5 million from what we ratified. If you include the anomaly, that's another close to $5 million. You're almost up by $10 million,
Yeah,
right?
4.6, yes.
And then for June, you're seeing a correction. Actually, there you go. There is a slowdown in June because you were having you were having substantial growth of about 6%. But for June, you're showing a what is that? You've collected
10,741,059.
and
plus,
last year.
Plus interest and penalties of 128,558. The decrease is somewhere around 5.5 million as compared to the same period last fiscal year.
And that basically changes. We're still up by about 3%, correct? Even if you take that into consideration.
That's right.
Yeah.
Baseline through May, 3% increase.
Okay. Bear with me, Mr. Chair. I'm going over the major categories, and then I'm going to make a comment. Gross receipts tax. Gross receipts tax.
Gross receipts tax,
We are tracking at what number?
we're tracking 162,365,487.
And what did we ratify?
159,541,059.
Okay, so we're up by
We're up 2% or about 2.8 million.
close to 3 million, right? Okay.
Yeah, about 3 million.
The month of June,
And the month of June is showing an increase of another 3 million. With 3.3 million.
so how much percent is that? From
That's 25% increase.
25% increase. So again, the month of June isn't going to hurt.
Yeah.
Because again, you're showing double-digit increases. Again, I'm sure some of my other members of the body are going to ask questions to how these numbers came about. The issue I have to bring up here is obviously what we've seen over these past several months and again, some of my members of the body have criticized my office for our tracking. And yes, I must confess, I stated in February we were tracking at the 450, 454 level, 455. I stated that in March. I stated that in April. I've stated that in May. I've stated that in June. But obviously things are changing, and what my office is projecting are, again, baseline is an area a little closer to 460, not taking into consideration the obviously the changes that are in the law in terms of revenue enhancements. And I'm willing to be the conservative, but I must note what you are presenting here today and what has been represented in these past few months. There has been inconsistency in the part of the administration, and whether it was in the month of February when the administration again went from a 450 some number down to a 447 number, down to a 434, now up to a 454 base. Of course, understanding now the anomalies. And now, of course, projections because of revenue enhancements to the 471 figure we're looking at. And then, of course, if this $21 million is added on at 490. I think it's important as we move along that, and again, folks, these numbers are, the questions that I'm asking and the answers that have been giving are more in line with what the Finance Committee and the OFB has been looking on in terms of revenues coming into the government of Guam. No one can doubt that the revenues coming into this government, and it doesn't have to be just what was passed on 2902, but there has been a consistent trend as we started on the first month of the year, to the third month of the year, to the sixth month of the year, that the government of Guam is collecting more and more revenues. One of the issues, and I think as we deliberate and we finally ratify what revenues will come into this government, I think the more difficult part will be the second half of this agenda, is the spending authority. Because I must remind you folks, in the State of the Territory address, when there was major concerns put out by the governor and the commitment of the administration to reduce spending, and there was a plan outlined, and whether it was furloughs was one of them, but there were other cost containment measures. But if we ratify, and let's say we do ratify a 491, 92 figure, then that would mean that the tracking on spending in January and February has not changed $1 from what the tracking and spending is this day in July. And again, more than half a year has gone by in the year 2007, and now we are put in a situation. And I'm gonna have some issues once we finish ratifying the revenue picture. But when it comes to the appropriation sides, we have to seriously consider again what kind of direction are we going to go in? Are we going to sooner or later show some sort of temperance in our spending? So again, I want to thank you so much for your answers to my questions. It goes along from what I've been saying, or I've been pronouncing for many months. And I know some of the members of the minority have differences of opinion. But for me, it's not how much you take in. It's how much you spend, and that's something that we're going to have to all work collaboratively with you folks in showing not only to members of this legislature but to the administration, but also showing to the people of Guam, the taxpayers of Guam, that we are stewards of their money. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
We have Senator Forbes, then Senator Spishu. Anybody else? Senator Pangilinan, Senator Blas, Speaker Forbes.
Thank you for providing what we asked for yesterday. And I apologize, I wasn't here earlier to ask questions, but then on the other hand, other people did. So, first question I have is because I'm hearing the word anomaly 80,000 times, and I know Senator Pangilinan and Speaker Mpinko both brought the issue up. We're throwing that word anomaly around all over the place. And I want to ask again, what makes an anomaly an anomaly? What makes an anomaly an anomaly?
A couple of things I believe defines an anomaly, and that is collections that are not part of the normal experience of collections in a particular category.
Do you mean by size or by is it by quantity or quality?
Type of collection. And I think maybe Art can speak to that better, since they're the ones that identify those anomalies.
I guess this is the question, Art. Is something an anomaly because of what it is, or is something an anomaly because of how much it is?
It's more on what it is.
Okay. Now, I know Senator Pangilinan asked this earlier, but, amongst the various and sundry anomalies, you have these reimbursements for child tax credit. Is this the first time we ever got one?
No, we've got that, I think, 6 years ago, when an agreement was agreed upon between the department and the IRS.
Are we likely to receive some in the future?
If we pay out refunds, we would get them.
No, I understand that, but I mean, under normal operating practices, you'd be getting them, right?
Right.
So how can you call that an anomaly if it's something you've received previously and are likely to receive in the future?
I think what has happened in the past, when we first started to receive it, I wasn't part of the finance group that was receiving it. I don't know how they reported it, but I think they were looking at it as something that wasn't ordinary or wasn't part of the ordinary course of revenues coming in, because they weren't reporting it in the past. So maybe they reported it as an anomaly at that time. But
So the word anomaly has just followed it through its history.
Right.
Because I would make a suggestion that an anomaly to me is a one-time event that will never be repeated and has never occurred previously. Even if a cycle does not coincide with a fiscal year, if in fact there is some degree of predictability. I understand in this case that refunds, which should be predictable but aren't, drive this. But I don't think you can call these things. And my concern is, when we use the word anomaly loosely, it's kind of like, let's not pay attention to that. And frankly, guys, and I'll be honest with you, and what you've given us today really only kind of drives that. My concern, among many others, is I want to capture on paper what revenues we receive, because you ask us to appropriate against those things. So if this is not anomalous in the sense that it's happened before, it's happening now, and very likely it can happen in the future, then I don't want to call it an anomaly. It doesn't matter to me if it's repetitive every single fiscal year, or if it's repetitive every 3 fiscal years, or if it's repetitive every 5 fiscal years. If somewhere along the cycle you're going to see that revenue, then when we come to the appropriate fiscal year, you should simply count it as revenue. But to constantly call it an anomaly makes it sound like you were walking in the jungle and you kicked over a rock and, ooh, there was $2 million there. Well, we didn't expect that. This is somewhat predictable, right? It's a somewhat predictable source of revenue. It's not money hiding under a rock. Would that be accurate? Am I inaccurate?
That's correct.
Yeah, and
we're
don't get me
expecting
wrong,
this
I'm not
every
trying to
quarter.
inflate anything. I'm just saying if it's predictable, regardless of the cycle of occurrence, especially if that cycle of occurrence is driven by our own actions, then it ought to be called revenue. Even if you don't see it every year, when you do see it, it's revenue. To call it an anomaly is to make it sound like you were walking in the jungle, you kicked a rock over, and there was already a press release that made it sound like the $21 million was hiding under a rock and they were walking through the jungle, and oops, when it was quite predictable given the track record of work that you guys had done with that. What about these individual tax anomalies, corporate tax anomalies, withholding tax anomalies?
Those are
Why are they anomalous?
we consider that anomalies because it's like sell a property, 10% withholding is required on the disposal of
Why is that
an asset.
anomalous?
It's because they're probably not going to sell that property again.
I
next year.
understand, but part of the business cycle in Guam, at least, and I'm no businessman, but I've been alive long enough to see a couple of booms in Guam. And virtually every boom that's occurred in Guam is accompanied by rapid transit of property, passing from hand to hand. Heck, back in the Ad administration, when we had that record revenue year, that's because pieces of property were flipping sometimes 2 or 3 times, sometimes more in the course of a single fiscal year. Now, if it's part of our normal business cycle of boom and bust, to expect that in good years you're going to see real estate transactions take off, why does that make them anomalous? See, I don't understand the use of the word anomalous in conjunction, even if it's not an annual cycle, with a general cycle of activity. Why don't you pull it aside and say that this is additional real estate sales or something like that? But to call it anomalous, again, makes it sound like you're walking through the jungle, you kicked over a rock, and there's $2 million hiding under the rock. I mean, there is a certain predictability that if we are in a growth cycle, at least in Guam, my experience, just observing, reading the paper, watching the TV, is a growth cycle starts a real estate boom. A real estate boom means you're going to have more transactions. More transactions means you're going to have more anomalies? No, it means you're going to have more revenue. The sale of real estate. I mean, don't we want, ideally, to create an atmosphere in Guam where people are buying houses a lot? Every person having their own home? And to create that environment where everybody's going to have their own home, people are going to have to sell property, subdivide it, sell it to a developer, develop it themselves. I mean, there's going to be that kind of activity. Isn't there a better way of defining this than saying that we get a big real estate transaction, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing? That means every hotel that gets sold to another owner, you're going to call it an anomaly, right? I'm just asking.
It may, because of maybe we are too detailed in what we were doing, because if we didn't do this and next year we came up with a forecast and it was way too high.
See, Art, I'm saying.
We don't have that.
No, I understand,
that
Art,
data
but
there to say-
this is the problem with forecasting the way we do. We forecast based entirely on tax information. I mean, I feel bad for you, actually, I do, Art, because the entire forecasting and revenue forecasting model of the government of Guam, to the extent that such thing exists, is based on your data. And that's actually wrong. It should be based partially on your data, but someone ought to be paying attention to some kind of econometric stuff. Someone ought to be anticipating what's happening in the business cycle. Somebody should be anticipating, I mean, the way that, and everybody keeps talking about this military buildup, and I'll bet you dollars to donuts, this is the way the military buildup is being factored into revenue forecasting models for the future. A bunch of people, not necessarily economists and not necessarily you guys from Revenue Tax, are sitting around a table going, wow, there's probably going to be a lot of growth, huh? Yeah, it could be. What, you think there'll probably be a lot of houses being built, no? Yeah. How many houses you think? Well, maybe there's been some, and it's that level of interaction on that stuff that drives this. So what happens is, I think, by observation, is it gets confusing, because you, as a tax guy, and I don't blame you for this, are looking at this stuff and saying, well, we don't have a boom every year, so let's segregate all that stuff. On the other hand, we ought to be anticipating growth, if growth is in fact coming. I'm not saying cherry pick and make things look rosy, but if you think growth is coming, look for it. If it's there, and have it drive some of these things. So I don't mind that you set it aside because you don't think we're going to have a real estate boom every year. But rather than call it an anomaly, like we are doomed to poverty, and if something good happens, that's an anomaly. That's how I feel when I see this. That our normal state of existence has to be misery. And if there's some economic activity out there, that's an anomaly. I mean, if this is based on sales and transactions in real estate, granted, the same hotel will not sell next year that sold this year, but it sold this year. And there's revenue that came from that. And next year, another hotel might be sold because if the economy picks up, people will want to buy. And people will want to sell. Are we not counting selling and buying as part of economic activity? If that's not economic activity, what the heck is? Anyway, it's a pet peeve. But when you add all this up, guys, and just so I don't have to go nuts, what are you saying the revenues are going to be? I don't care about anomalies or that. To me, if it's revenue, it's revenue. Was it 491, 496, 493, 494? I don't remember.
It comes up to 496,261,435.
496.
That's inclusive of the 21 million.
Yeah, I got you. So inclusive, well, that is revenue. It's not up to us to decide whether you got the 21 million bucks. You got the 21 million bucks. We may quibble over how you spend it, or we may quibble over whether we allow you to spend it, or we quibble over a lot of things. Can't quibble over the fact that it's sitting at the Bank of Guam, I suspect. And I want to point out something to you guys, and you better be conscious of this because it's definitely something that I'm conscious of as we get into the expenditure part of it. I suspect that's $21 million in cash that is currently sitting. You haven't spent it yet, right? You haven't, right? Di mapatsa, right? Because that's 21 million bucks sitting in a bank, and it isn't 21 million bucks you're going to be receiving incrementally over time. There's a couple of infrastructure needs that this island desperately has that could use an immediate infusion of some significant cash. I'm thinking air conditioning systems in 2 schools, for example. And unlike regular revenue that trickles in month to month, this is cash in the bank that could be spent now so kids are not sitting in heat. So just bear it in mind as we go into the rest of the bill, okay? And if I sound facetious with this whole anomaly thing, all I'm asking you to do, and Art, I do think it's prudent to recognize that the same hotel isn't sold every year. But it is equally prudent to recognize that in the rise and fall of the Guam economic cycle, there will be good times and bad times. And we can't count all the good times as anomalies and believe that our fate is to have bad times. Got to get a little enthusiastic. Don't inflate. But frankly, guys, I'm not sure that that's been your sin. I'm not saying I necessarily, I'm in a boat, guys, where you guys give us numbers, and at this stage, I should have a big thing of Morton salt right next to me here. So as the numbers come in, I can kind of pour them on before I chew them. I'm kind of in that state right now, but I think it's gone both ways, man. I think sometimes you give us big numbers, and sometimes you give us very small numbers. And I hope that that's not driven by whatever the policy is at the moment. I hope it's not driven by whatever you'd like to see passed on the floor of the legislature at that particular time. I hope it's not driven by whatever news story you'd like to see, or however you like people to feel, or any of those things. I mean, I really hope. I'm not kidding. I really hope it's not. I hope when there's been errors, they've been honest errors. I hope that when there's been misstatements, they've been honest misstatements. I did say back in 29-2, and I have, I defer to the fiscal prowess of many people in this room, both senators and non-senators, far above mine. But back during 29-2, when I was looking at just the actuals then, I was having a real hard time swallowing some of that revenue because it just seemed understated. As we look at these numbers today, assuming that this is an accurate reflection of reality, salt. I maybe Tabasco and salt. Just assuming this is an accurate reflection of reality, if we make that assumption, then clearly they were understated during 29-2. That's beyond debate because the difference is so great. You know, it's not oops, it's a million more. Oops, it's I mean, the variances have. What was it, John? You were saying before about ranges. This is open range. This range stretches across all of Texas and goes into New Mexico and Oklahoma. That's how big this range is. So this cannot be a range issue. This has to be a error issue. All right? And whether it was an error of statement, an error of policy, an error of looking at things, I don't know what it was. But in a sense, it's not for me to go there and try and determine what it was. But it appears that if this is accurate, when we did 29-2, we were given a very different story. I mean, now we're looking at Star Wars, The Return of the Jedi, and before we were looking at Star Trek, Nemesis or whatever. We were looking at an entirely different movie. And I want to say that a lot of decisions that were made in 29-2 were driven by information that at the very minimum is questionable. And as a consequence, at least me, and I know a few others here, are probably going to look at some of those decisions made in 29-2 and rethink them based on the new information that we have here. Because it's just not right. It's just not right to, I mean, all of us, I'm sure, agree that driver's licenses needed to go up and stuff like that. But some of the decisions that were made in 29-2 have had harmful effect. And there's no reason for people to suffer when they don't need to suffer. And certainly, I know a whole lot of people who work for the government of Guam who have been in a state of panic for quite a few months here. And if that was never necessary, then it never should have happened. I mean, Art knows a lot of people because they work for him. Lou knows a lot of people because they work for her. I know them because when I'm walking by and they come up, Senator, State Speaker. You know, I mean, that's the way it's been for months. I don't know, my director said. So why are you coming down here to the legislature? My director told me to go down there and talk to you guys about the furlough. That's what I get. I remember not too long ago, Department of Public Works, see Larry. Larry brought down a bunch of his people and he staged this thing down here that I walked into. Frank was already doing it, and I walked in and my back was hurting a little bit, so I was just in one of those moods. Kind of reminded me of the old days, Ben, when another governor used to send people down here. But so I walked in and I sat down and Larry's trying to do this thing, and I just looked at the employees and said, how many of you guys are classified? Well, the AG said that, da-da-da-da-da. Oh, yeah. How many guys are unclassified? But we're all 100% federally funded. And I said, well, I don't know why you're being furloughed then. Where's the savings in that? How's that? And then I find out during the course of this thing that they were told to come down here because somehow the legislature was going to influence whether or not the governor was going to furlough them. Not sure why.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, why were we?
Because my chief of administration is not authorized to sign off on payroll when there's not enough authority to spend.
Oh, I understand that, but 29-2 happened because you guys came down here with a bill. Not you personally, again, okay.
But it was a different bill.
It was a bill that was $20 million out of balance.
Right. It was a bill with a GRT increase.
And still $20 million out of balance. You do remember that, don't you? In your haste to get the bill down here, you sent us a bill that was purported to be in balance and wasn't. Putting the legislature in this situation where it had to balance your bill. And you know what we could have done then, and I do regret that we didn't do this. The minute we realized that, we should have shot that baby back and said, you've sent us a bill that doesn't balance. This is useless. But, tried to be cooperative, tried to work together. Still want to. Don't get me wrong. I still want to work with you guys. But the one thing that is a little bit different, man, is that I'm going to question more than I ever did before, and I'm going to look more carefully than I did before. I'm going to take a lot less on faith, and I'm going to. Well, I want to work with you, but you know, there's that song by The Who that ends with that wonderful line, "We won't be fooled again." I just don't want to be misinformed. I don't want to be misinformed. And I don't want to be told either, and I'm warning you about this because I've seen you guys drift in this direction. I don't want to be told because of Rory's provision that we included in 29-2 that suddenly the responsibility for providing us with information has completely disappeared from the administration. Yes, we're working on a system here and trying to put one in where we collaboratively do these estimates, but I swear if you guys turn around and say, oh, we have no responsibilities now, it'll change. I want you to know that. Collaboration means collaboration. It doesn't mean one is MAGAS and one is subordinate. Collaboration means everybody gets to say what they want to say, and no one has to feel like they're being disloyal or out talking out of shop if they don't agree. And you know what else collaboration means? You're not allowed to get mad. I'm not allowed to get mad. We might have feelings about each other. Who cares? But we're not allowed to get mad. Amen. I mean, seriously, guys, you know, and I got to tell you something, too, and this is just a moment of, revelation and clarity. But you never have a cabinet meeting that I don't hear about in, 15 minutes after the cabinet meeting happens. And I'm sure that's true of every member of at least the Republican side. And hell, Rory's probably got a better pipeline than I do. All these things that you, not you again personally, I'm speaking in the grand you. All these things that you hatch in darkness, like I told Larry, are revealed. They always are. So, not paraffin. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, either you want to stop or you don't. But I'm begging you to stop. I'm begging you to be as clean with this stuff as you can be. And let's move forward. So, when I look at these anomalies, is it okay with you guys if I don't consider them necessarily as anomalous as you apparently do? Is that all right?
Mr. Speaker, I just had the office run the tracking without putting back the anomalies to be a part of the tracking exercise, and the tracking comes to 464 million.
I never asked for it, and that's not information I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is making sure that if land gets sold, it's treated as revenue.
Yes.
I don't want the entire real estate boom that's coming up to be treated like it's not part of our revenue stream. Sure as heck was back in the Ad administration, and sure as heck was back in the Camacho administration, the first one a long time ago. That was revenue, got spent. Does it mean it's going to be that good every year? Absolutely not. But it's still revenue.
Yeah, that speaks to something I recently attended, and I agree with you, Mr. Speaker. I attended a very, very interesting course recently, I think about a month ago, was it, Lou? There was this very dynamic guy out of Harvard.
Jimmy Spalding. He's a
yes.
dynamic guy.
Yeah. But anyway, it was very interesting that at the end of 5 days, and part of the course of the course was that he interviewed Bernadette, Bernie Artero, and myself with regard to the tracking and the revenue projection. And his summation after he interviewed the two of us was that the methodology that we are using is probably not the best, because especially during times when the economy is really fluctuating with the military buildup and all of the things that are kind of unique each year as this growth takes place, it is not the methodology to use. So that's why Bernie and I agreed that when we get together with SAS, where we're going to take a look at some of the other things that he offered some very good revenue models, some of which we could actually take pieces off and put together.
I mean, if you really think about it, Bertha, if you take a historic view, you know when we are the worst when it comes to this stuff is at the beginning of growth and at the beginning of decline. Because we seem to never, ever catch on a revenue basis the growth when it happens. I mean, we ramp up to it, right? And we almost never, ever catch the declines when they start. So we always have these years where, like in the end at times, where the revenue estimate is here and the actual revenue is all the way up here. And then when it started to go down, the revenue estimate is here and the actuals are down there.
That's right.
And that's why you get these giant things. And that's why, again, I really don't want to sound like I know what I'm talking about a lot here because I'm not an expert in this. But there's got to be some kind of, I don't know how to do it, but it's not my expertise, but there's got to be some kind of econometric modeling.
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this is the only model that...
I think the conversation is getting too long.
Yeah.
And
this is what we have.
the chair just have to introduce.
But do you disagree then, Bert? That's why I'm asking, that we need to work on this so we're not counting these things as anomalies when they are in fact part of natural growth?
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. Ms. Chairman, the retiring speaker mentioned that I probably have a very good pipeline, but I just want to clarify for the record that I did ask Bertha on Monday for June's draft, and she said that they're not available. And then today a document was produced that left her office last Wednesday. So maybe it was an oversight. I'm thinking it was. It was addressed to the speaker and to the vice speaker, and it was.
Can I just like to include? We just received it too, so I want to thank. And then it was going to be disseminated.
I think part of
Senator
that was my fault, Senator. We have a monthly reporting requirement that was prepared by the staff for me, and in reviewing, I reviewed, of course, the cover page, the top page, and I wasn't aware that the June draft was a part of what was released. I thought that what I signed off on was just the top page, which was to comply with the reporting requirement that requires revenue actual collections information as of a cutoff point. And so I apologize, Senator.
No, you don't
Bishop.
need. Yeah, I'm not looking for an apology or an explanation. Just to let the former
I guess
speaker
it did
know
leave
that.
my office, BBMR, but normally drafts are not usually made a part of official circulation until they are not drafts anymore. So, but that's okay. This is what transparency is all about. At every stage of the draft, why shouldn't it be shared? As long as we can all understand that this is a dynamic process and the numbers change, there are moving targets, and we shouldn't be held to the last projection every time.
And I understand why the child tax credits probably should be taken out of the regular revenue stream, but I don't understand yet why it's not captured as revenue in the beginning of the fiscal year. We only have federal sources, and that includes Section 30 money. So maybe as a standard practice moving forward, if you think we're going to get at least $8 million a year, that $8 million ought to be captured. Just the way Section 30 money is reimbursed for prior year, the same should be with the child tax credits. I don't know if anyone would have an objection to doing that.
Yeah. The only difference with that is that Section 30 is not a reimbursement; it's an entitlement. With this one, it's a reimbursement process with ACTC.
But it's always on top of what was projected for or adopted for that revenue projection.
Yes, definitely it should be included, and I think there's been a determination made here that it probably should be a part of the normal collection experience as opposed to it being treated as an anomaly.
I want to say that I appreciate the discussion so far because it really underscores the need for the administration and the legislature to work on these revenue projections together. I don't think I've ever heard the administration saying that it's no longer their responsibility to do that. The law is very clear that the Special Accounting Services Group, which consists of the classified employees, will work on a regular basis with the staff of the Office of Finance and Budget, so they come up with one revenue forecast to be presented to the legislature. Isn't that your understanding of the new law?
Well, my understanding of the new law is I think it is really a wonderful amendment that would provide the vehicle upon which the different people who are involved in arriving at revenue projections year to year come together and work in a collaborative process to come up with something that is, I guess, agreeable to everyone. I think it's a wonderful part of the law, and I look forward to participating in that process. I do think that while with regard to the requirements, the requirement of the governor in a separate part of law, and perhaps under the Organic Act that he deliver a budget, that in that budget there are two components, and that is a revenue projection and a statement of request. So I'm hoping that in collaboration with SAS, as we would like to see it, that what the governor eventually comes out with would mirror what has been decided within the SAS venue. But certainly, if we disagree strongly, I am sure that he has the ability to present a different revenue projection, with all due respect to the special group.
And
but for the most part, I'd like to think that it would be in collaboration and that it would be in agreement as far as the presentation.
And the legislature, I believe, would have the ultimate authority to revise that recommended revenue projection that is produced by the Office of Finance and Budget.
That's
so there's nothing set in stone, and we know that projections are moving targets, and sometimes people have different interpretations, but we want the process to be as open and transparent as possible. Do you recall, because the previous speaker said that we're underestimating these revenue projections, do you recall how the government of Guam did in fiscal year 2006?
In fiscal year 2006, I believe the actual collections was as restated by the audit is 434 million. Is that correct, Lou?
423.
Or 423? I'm sorry. Yeah, I defer to Lou on that one.
The revenue adopted was 435, 436, but the actual collected was 423 audited. And the public auditors here, but that I believe include the child tax credit. So in the child tax credit was, if it's 435 and 433, 12 million. What was the child tax credit? 6 million?
I think about 6 million. I don't know. I don't recall exactly what that number was.
I mean, without that child tax credit, the projection was $18 million short. And I can't see that as under-reporting these or understating these revenue projections. And in the case of fiscal year 2007, would it be possible that this bill reflect the revised revenue projections to include June's drafts?
I just asked the office to run the June draft, so in the course of the session, I can offer that preliminary information, although I would caution that before we can extract what part of that is amnesty, I would not take it as baseline, but I'd be happy to provide that.
Okay, part of your revenue, your revised revenue projection of 496 million, it takes into account a 100% collection rate on these new departmental fees. Are you comfortable with that? It takes into account 2.3 million for the Dave Santos Act. I've written a letter to the Director of Revenue Tax asking if that's what we collected. $500,000 in the alien labor fees. Do you believe we would collect that? Department of Land Management fees, 1.7 million. GPD fees, 182,000.
Yes, Senator. Absent any concrete numbers that lend itself to our ability to measure the experience for certain, we can only go by our best estimate at the time that these revenue enhancements were offered.
The fees were also raised at, or there was fees also established at Department of Revenue and Taxation in 2902, were they not?
Yes, they were.
Maybe I'm missing something, but I'm wondering why the fees for Department of Revenue and Taxation is not captured into your projection of the 496 million. I know that Speaker Ben's provision would only capture 10% of that amount.
If you notice in row 18, column E, I shaded that because I took out the projection of 2.7 million for R&T fees. That was if you look at column D, it has 4,152,186, Senator. The next column over E, you will find is exactly 2.7 million down. I shaded that to show the body that I took out, the 2.7, in my effort to leave that column at adopted without the revenue enhancements to really show the true tracking. However, in column F, as you can see, the revenue statement reported is showing 3.4 million, which I believe captured a good part of the license and fees that was projected for the year, and I did not adjust that. As you can see, the shade stops on column E. So I assume that, and because I could not extrapolate from there what that true actual collection is, because I am sure that some license and fees were paid in May. Some people do pay ahead of time. They want to avoid the rush and all that. So I did not smooth that out, so to speak. So that is a true reflection of what is happening in May, I feel, unless we look deeper and find some different behavior.
Yeah, I think we're really moving closer to nailing down how we project revenues. The next part, which we've been saying all along, is the spending authority. I saw the audit by Deloitte & Touche that the Public Auditor Commission, and people criticize that there's overspending happening in this government, but there was only one agency, I believe, the Guam Public School System, that showed an overspending of $6 million, and that's because of whether or not that money was for prior fiscal year or the current fiscal year. You recall that, right? But if you look at that audit, all the other departments and agencies are spending within their authorized level. So if we could nail down the projections, the next step is the spending authority.
I agree, Senator, and I was actually very pleased to see from the financial highlights out of the audit that, in fact, the general operations for line agencies, we actually saved $11 to $12 million as far as appropriations, and I think the Pub OPA, who is with us this afternoon, she's nodding. So yes, we did save, or at least a cost avoidance, perhaps maybe not liquid savings, but we avoided spending 11 million, and I was very pleased to see.
Funny how the government of Guam gets 21 million, and all of a sudden we're in the money. Never mind the $524 million deficit or the $1 billion debt we've been talking about. Just for clarity purposes and for people watching, is this $21 million a windfall? Is it new monies that can go anywhere beyond what the governor is proposing that it go for? The media is already purporting it to be a windfall. $21 million, manna from heaven. Is this money a windfall? I know the answer to the question I'm asking, but it seems like for the last day and a half, you haven't really been given an opportunity to present
I
your
don't-
side.
I don't really think, personally, and I may be corrected and some may disagree, I don't think it's a windfall if it's something that we were entitled to that just took time for it to get to us.
No, but my point is if your spending requirement is more than your revenue estimate, is that because part of your 496 includes the $21 million?
Yes. So, I'm sorry, what was the question? What
I'm
was the
saying if the government of Guam's spending requirement is about 400, upwards of 490 million, and the revenue projection it was 470 million, including a $30 million tax amnesty, which we only got 9, then you get this 21 million. Is this $21 million considered a windfall that the money can go anywhere beyond what's required to keep this government open for the next?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't call it a windfall. I still wouldn't call it a windfall. But the presentation I made on the revised estimate, presents the 21 million as being added into the revenue stream because of the deposit that was recently made for past years, prior years, federal retirees payments over under Section 30.
I think Mr. Chairman, we're moving somewhere to a point of consensus, and I want to say that to you as a slight concession. During the fiscal year 2007 budget process, I think I was the lone voice that kept asking, where's Carlos Bordalio? Where's Carlos Bordalio? Where's Carlos Bordalio? Because I believed that we had to have BBMR present with us every step of the way. And in the beginning of this round 3 of 2007, there's other members that are asking, where's Carlos Bordalio? So I think sometimes I'm just ahead of my time, but eventually we get around to being on the same page. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then the swearing in, now it's very important. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. Senator Senator Pangilinan, then Senator Senator Pangilinan. Okay. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Pangilinan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm following all of the conversations, the questions, and the answer, and it doesn't really matter where we slot all this money. It's, are we going to have enough money to pay for what we've authorized to be spent? And that's the bottom line. But I understand that, perhaps this will help us do a better job in the 08 budget. And we hope that it will contribute. In discussing anomalies, though, I just wanted to ask about, I guess, 2 anomalies, that are not reflected in the total revenues that have been spent or will be spent for FY 207, and then a question with regards to the Section 30 revenues. I wasn't quite clear in the discussion of the reason for the decrease of the revenue on Section 30 from the $59 million that was adopted in 07, in 2902, to a revised $51 million, categorized as I guess, federal sources. And the reason why I'm not too clear on that. And then there was a reference, to that adjustment. The other thing that concerns me is the statement made, I thought, by that I heard with regards to Section 30, that the $6 million line of credit, which is the first anomaly I want to talk about, is that it's not reflective here that the governor took out $6 million in a line of credit, that is new cash coming into the government that is going towards expenditures authorized and we're not seeing the adjustment for the repayment of that from this fiscal year, because according to the Attorney General's opinion, the only way that line of credit could have been exercised and not be contrary to the Supreme Court decision of breaking the cap was that they have to be repaid with current year revenues, not future year revenues. And so I don't see that adjustment at all in the presentation that's been sent down by the governor. I don't see that it was not reflected, I think, in 2902. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the representation made was that it'll come out of the 2008 Section 30 revenue, which would then make the exercise of that line of credit contrary illegal with regards to the ceiling cap. So I don't know how you're going to, that's an additional $6 million that we have that we're already paying for this year's authorized expenditures, not reflected at all in either revenue enhancement, anomaly, whatever. The second anomaly, of course, that we have is that the governor took out $8 million from the bond funds that were not projected revenues for operations in 2007 budget. Yet he took those monies out, applied them to the expenditures of the 2007, and yet it's not reflected anywhere here that those revenue that's a revenue that is available to meet operations. So if you are taking these revenues outside of all of the projections here, you have an additional $14 million in revenue, cold hard cash to be exact, that the governor took, never projected to be collected, over and above the revenue projections for FY 207 to meet current year operating requirements, and yet it's not reflected anywhere here. So if we approve this $21 million, we keep the revenues expenditures that were appropriated for, that were covered by those $14 million, and then we're going to apply these new revenues to repay those expenses that have already been paid, then we are actually going to increase expenditure in the governor's proposal, not by 21 million, but add the 14. I would add the 14, and we're going to increase expenditure or available revenues now without increasing the available expenditure, the authorized expenditure levels. So, in effect, I would like to see some kind of adjustment and accounting for those revenues, either a decrease in the appropriation levels to reflect that those monies were taken and paid for, or that we now recognize those as revenues, and any new revenue we get, we put back to repay those for under these current year's operating revenues that will be collected, not from future year revenues and so forth. So I don't know how you're going to treat that, but when we get to the expenditure side, I think that's something that I would like to see you address and respond to, and how are we going to treat that?
Yes, we will look at that. I was just asking Art here while you were speaking if that was if that 6.2 had to come out of current year revenue. I didn't know. I don't know the stipulations of that line of credit.
I don't recall the all of the conditions to that particular line of credit. But I do know that when it is reported in the financials, it's reported as a sources. So it's below the transfers in, transfers out line after general fund expenditures. It's after net transfers, and then you add in, or actually it's a part of net transfers in, transfers out. That would be a source in, so it's not treated as revenues, at least as far as the $6 million is concerned, for financial reporting purposes. And I could show you through the financials here.
So you're treating it as inter-fund transfer? Or?
I have a 12 to 15 year history of general fund revenues and expenditures, net transfers in and out.
Right.
And in every instance in which there has been some borrowing to finance some of the government obligations, it's treated as a source within the categories of transfers in, transfers out.
But
It's not treated as revenue in the
financial
in the
statements.
financial, yeah.
But for the purpose of paying expenditures, it should be treated as part of the appropriations? I mean, what do you pay against that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you authorize a borrowing, wouldn't you authorize what it would be?
Yeah, it's not treated as revenue, but it does reduce overall, or at least it's accounted or it is taken into account in determining whether or not you have a surplus or a deficit for that year. So it's a source, but
Right.
not identified as revenue. And your questions, I'll need to confer with our auditors for some of the answers to your questions because they're pretty technical.
Okay, all right. Thank you. But I because again, it's if I'm going to approve additional money, I'm saying it's a net transfer in. I realize that, and I'll give you that. But it means that somewhere along the line, I don't have to find the cash to now charge against that expenditure that's being paid for by this net transfer in. So really, I should have a surplus of $6 million under revenue if I appropriate it evenly. In other words, if I had $1 million in revenue and I had $1 million in expenditures and I get a $500,000 net transfer in, but I didn't increase my expenditures to $1,500,000, it's still $1 million. When I do my financial statement, I'll have a surplus of $500 million.
Provided the revenues that you originally project
You're gonna collect.
materialize. That's
Yes,
correct.
that's right. That's right. And from the look of this, we may be realizing exactly what we project, and in some instances, we're exceeding what we project. So when you have that surplus, and because this net transfer in is not a money under a rock, as the speaker said, but a net transfer in which becomes a liability when booked, correct?
That's right. It's a due to it.
It becomes due to then. So somewhere along the line, due is going to have to do. It's going to come due, and we're going to have to pay it. So that's what I'm saying. And if we don't, then it's doo-doo. So we have to account for this thing so that we don't do. Okay. So I just want to say that I need to see those in order to approve additional expenditure in revenues that, if all revenues are accounted for, become surplus, in my opinion. And if we have a surplus, if we've taken money, if part of the net transfer, look, how did then we address the $8 million that were taken from the two bond funds that were certified to pay the COLA retirees under the judgment and not paid? Is that also a net transfer in?
I believe right now it was probably treated as a transfer in, but it's showing as a due to that fund.
Right. So then, one thing happened. Two things can happen in my reading of that. When we do have the cash, that it's a due to. So we have two choices, in my opinion. One, we reimburse those funds. Two, we pay the COLA for exactly why we took it out for in the first place. And so if we do have surplus created because we've taken money and offset obligations that are in the revenue stream and we meet that revenue stream, then we have to pay that COLA, in my opinion. And so those are the two things that I'm trying to do. So, we might supplant this due to account and figure out a way to make it work with the governor and take the cash and plug it into the COLA payments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to go back to, and I know that we had the discussion about the amnesty, but I'm a little concerned here because in our discussions with 2902, we talked about $30 million being received from the amnesty, and now it's dropped to 9. It's a $21 million variance, and I don't want to get into why it's dropped so far down. But and I recognize that we're probably going to have to, and we're trying to collect everything that we've had already with regards to the amnesty. But where are we? I mean, are there any figures to date other than 9 million total for amnesty?
We're working on that amnesty figure. The reason why it's taking a little bit longer, it's done manually when we receive it. There's no computer program to say this is amnesty, and you can just punch the button and it comes out at the end of the day. It's put in a spreadsheet. Somebody adds it up. It gets categorized by type of tax, and at the end of a day, if possible, they could get a total. But in the last few days, there was a lot of taxpayers that came in, and it just takes scrutiny because also these amnesty could have been paid over at the Department of Administration, and we have to look for those because it wasn't in our control to determine if it was an amnesty amount. So that's why it's taking a little bit longer. Joe Rios is probably saying about a week, right, Joe? About a week, we probably can get solid numbers in there.
How
and hopefully it's a
confident?
lot more than the 9.
How confident are we to reach the 9 million mark?
I felt we already reached it. I think we're over the 9.
You're over the 9.
Yeah.
Conservatively, how much over?
Probably Joe's saying probably about 1 million.
How much?
About 1 million over the 9.
Oh, so about a million.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because again, it's a huge drop, and I like you would probably had wished that it was closer to what you had predicted, what you had forecasted, as opposed to what you're actually getting. Secondly, with regards to in your anomalies, let's go back to the anomalies. And as far as the corporate tax, April 2007, the $4 million that you provide for the anomaly for corporate tax April 2007, is that an estimate? Is that's too clean of a number?
What happened was we pursued a prior year debt liability that was owed to the government, tax liability. They came in, they made the payment of this amount. So I don't think that's going to happen next year. So that's why we can.
So, but it was exactly 4 million.
Yes, it was. I'm not too sure. I gotta get those numbers back.
Can you please, because like I said, it's a lot of zeros. It's too clean of a number when you're looking at you're looking at the spreadsheet here. It appears to be more of an estimate as opposed to an actual. And we can talk about it later on.
I gotta clear with the budget office.
Sure.
They're the ones that came.
Lastly, and the reason I need to bring this up, but although this is considered an expense, we put it in our revenue side. But it's more of an expense than it is a revenue. Our provision for tax refunds and EITC, what we put in here, it's in the law here, $75,600,000. How much have we spent on that? How much have we?
On refunds?
And is this provision for last year's refund?
No, what they
2
do
years
is
ago?
they forecast for next year's, and what they're supposed to do is put that money aside for next year's refunds.
Oh, so this
So we're
putting
way
money-
behind the 8 ball when we say provisions for refunds because we're still paying 2004
Right.
tax returns and prior, 2005 and prior. But we're supposed to be putting, those amounts are supposed to have been put aside already, and we're paying out of that provisions from the prior year to pay for those. And then this year, we're supposed to put another for next year. So we can take from there and pay that year. Well, next year, we're putting aside for next year's refunds. But
Okay.
we're way behind. We've always been that way since way back,
All right.
several years.
So, although we haven't spent on, how much have we put into that account?
It's always in and out. It's always, we put in, we just take it out to pay prior year refunds. So we never got caught up to really put aside provisions, this provision to pay next year's refunds. It goes into the account and goes right out to pay prior year refunds.
All right. Lastly, last one, Mr. Chair. If we're not to make any changes in Public Law 2902, there is a sizable increase to the total amounts here, which is almost close to $18 million above the 496 that's being presented. I'm a little concerned here, Mr. Chair, with regards to we can't even get into the expenditure side until we make the corrections on the revenue side. So I'm asking from the administration with regards to any requests to make some of these changes in some of these numbers as presented in 2902 that would actually be affected because of this new bill on appropriations.
Well, Senator, I think it would, thank you for that. I think I would request that the revenue presentation that was done, that we presented today, be adopted in consonance with this bill that is now before the body, because that would just make clear the adjustments that has the changes in the revenues that have occurred since 2902, in order that we can support the expenditure amendments, the spending amendments that we also have in the same bill. Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And it goes back to one of my initial concerns and initial questions with regards to the amnesty amounts. You know, for I recognize that 9 million is an estimate, but Mr. Chair, one of the things that we really need to do is we're still in the mode of trying to find as much money as we can, not only to pay off for what we to continue to run government, but recognizing that we have a lot of debts and a lot of bills that we've got to pay. So I'm very much interested on the numbers, on some actual numbers with regards to amnesty before we can actually move on being able to make those needed amendments to the amounts appropriated for the fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Tina Rose Mooney Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions that I have on hand here, Mr. Chair, and I'm hoping that maybe Art or Luke can help me here. On the Section 30 funding, we have a breakdown with the immigration fees that are collected to date. And if I can remember correctly, maybe not all the numbers, but in the 27th Guam Legislature, we tried to capture some of the fees that were, I guess, escaped us with I guess, some memorandum that funding had gone back to the immigration main office. But the methodology that we have and received to date, and as far as the funds received from immigration, from my understanding, there's like a 300% increase. And as I was looking at the breakdown here, I'm just wondering, are we tight in as far as getting the actuals on the immigration fees here to date?
The amounts that you see there are actual revenues received through the immigration office, and we get quarterly reports from them that detail all the transactions that they process, to which payments are made directly to them, and then it's accompanied with a U.S. Treasury check. And you were very instrumental in getting those reports prepared and sent to us quarterly, along with the accompanying check from the U.S. Treasury.
So, and based on that, on the percentage, I think, of fees coming up, then that's all inclusive of what's coming in to date.
That's correct, but I guess what doesn't show here, because maybe you're seeing a negative variance, for
Yes.
example, perhaps maybe the following month is when a large check would be received. So it probably would be best to wait until we get the full year's information to determine to what extent it actually grew. Yeah, whether that 300% increase in fees is actually reflected. It's consistent with it. If it isn't, then that kind of triggers us to
reinvestigate.
That's
Thanks. Thank you very much. And also, I think just wanting to secure the methodology, the formula that was utilized in as far as the collections of the Section 30 funding, is that inclusive of all the reservists and guardsmen and federal contracts and just everything that the federal government has here in Guam to date?
Federal contracts, construction and base is not part of Section 30. That's a different amounts. They're really contracted out. It's up to them to make their payments of their withholding into Guam, not through the federal system. So that wouldn't be a part of it. But the amounts that showed, I don't know if it was 59 or 57, but we last year, when we calculated that amount, we included $15 million of reservists in there. That's why it was bumped up that high. But the actual tracking that IRS is showing is in the low 40s. That's because of the withholding rates have gone down. Military personnel are probably gone to the war zone. Their incomes are not taxed at the rate they're earning. So we're losing those withholdings. And that's probably why it went down.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Tina Rose Mooney Barnes. If there's no other questions or comments by members of the body, I'm going to take Senator Judy Gutherts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and representatives of the administration. My questions are not on the numbers, but I'm just curious about something, and I think Art might be able to help us. Art, I know that a few months ago you entered into a contract with a former, I guess a now retired revenue and tax employee on a consultancy basis. Is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right. And what was the amount of that contract? Wasn't it rather high, if I recall?
It was it was first at 75, then it was amended to be $150,000.
Now, what was the purpose of that contract?
It was several things. Part of it was training, getting organized in our training of our collections, our audit, looking for federal funds to fund the training, and also to get somebody else to help us with the monies that we have found, the 21 plus the 14, the 15 million.
So that contract was that entered into with one person or more than one person?
One person. One person, and that person contracted whoever he needed to.
Was that other person a former IRS agent or employee?
Yes, he was.
Did that former person have some purview in their former capacity with respect to the monies that should have been given to Guam for payments made by federal folks on the island?
He was part of that the group, that IRS. I guess he was considered the disclosure officer and the liaison between Guam and the federal. I guess the inter areas and the federal government.
So this person who was a subcontractor of, I guess it was Mr. Bloss, Ray Bloss, is that correct?
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
He formerly worked for the IRS, and he was familiar with the monies that could be owed to the government of Guam. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
He didn't work for the IRS. He worked for the government of Guam.
At the time. I'm not talking about Mr. Bloss. I'm talking about the subcontractor.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
The subcontractor used to work for the IRS,
Yes, ma'am.
and then Mr. Bloss subcontracted him after revenue tax contracted with Mr. Bloss, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And this former IRS employee was familiar with the monies that may have been owed to the government of Guam, or at least he had the records or had somehow knowledge of this.
I don't know if he had knowledge of these missing funds that weren't paid over, but he was the person that oversaw the other agencies that would give them the numbers for him to certify to the Department of Interior for Section 30. So we had to go into these areas that weren't reporting correctly to IRS to see if that those numbers were in fact correct.
Okay. You know, Mr. Logan, the reason I bring this up is I may be wrong, but I do have a few concerns. I know in the federal government they have laws that are very strict about federal employees who retire and who later are employed elsewhere, who take knowledge with them from their former employment that somehow may become financially beneficial to them. These are ethics laws. At the same time, we have our own ethics law that regulates government of Guam employees and retirees, including public officials, who take information with them and then somehow use it to their benefit
Senator,
in a private capacity.
I'm going to request that if again, I've allowed this discussion to go along. We are in the particulars to the revenue side.
I understand, Mr.
And so
Chairman.
I'm going to again request if you can focus on that, and if not,
I'm
then
trying to just bring this forward because I just like Mr. Logan to think about this a little bit and maybe get back to us in a future meeting, and just clarify to this legislature that this in fact was not the case.
These numbers that IRS have, they didn't even know they were not paying it to us. It was done when I don't know if you recall, in 2003, when we first got our Section 30 amounts, and it was less $10 million. My concern was, why? Why is it less $10 million? They're not telling us why. That's why I needed somebody that can help us. And what it was really is reconciliation of these numbers that are being done back there are not really complete. Somebody has to go in there and say, where is DFAS? How come they're not reporting these amounts to IRS so that they can certify those amounts to DOI so that DOI can give us the Section 30. So that's what the process was. It was to look into these entities that report to IRS. So, my concern was on base. They don't show us what's on base, but somebody has to look in there and say, hey, is the BX reporting all their withholding to Guam through DOI? And that
No,
was the purpose.
I support that, Mr. Logan. I just want to make certain that the former federal employee that may have been involved on behalf of Guam did not violate any federal guidelines.
I don't think it did, ma'am.
Okay.
The process of that contract went through the AG's office. It cleared the AG's office. It was done properly.
How about, but not the subcontract?
The subcontract is
No,
between...
you have no purview over that.
Right, that's between the person I contracted with.
But
and
you see
whatever it is.
my point, though, right? My concern. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Guthrie. Senator Shimizu?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to, Art, commend you, to being able to get the amount of money, and just to bring closure to this. Department of Revenue and Taxation have always hired in the early days, in the days back 30 years, we've hired retired revenue agents, special investigators. We've put them all on contracts. They came with all the corporate knowledge that they had, and it benefited Guam without no ethical violations in that area. So I want to state that having it even been cleared by our own Attorney General, they are covered by the color of law. So that question should be addressed to the Attorney General, and not to try to bring or dampen your efforts, your creative efforts to go and get as much money as we can from the federal government, because they're not going to be very forthcoming in the kind of information that they give, believe me. And we try every effort to get those information. And as a result of that, you came back with at least $21 million. Now, this body today is going to try to decide about the revenue forecasting that we did 9 weeks, in the past, just to come up with another supplemental budget. This is the supplement to the supplement. And it's really amazing that I think we have less, Mr. Chairman, of 2 months before the end of the fiscal year, and we're still here trying to work on the 2007. Dalayit gatsu. Menanzu sa minlanat ko mapaporo to titanosta gini mapa 2007, and we're still working on it. But be it as it may, my question in terms of the revenue side, is this, the amount of what quote unquote revenue sources, it's usually revenue funds, but the amount that I saw, and I think our good chair tried to amend it earlier but withdrew, the revenue source amount to try to get some sense of balance, because we made projections, but projections are like it's almost like an art. It's not necessarily a pure science. We try to get the science into it, so we're short. But now we say, well, we got an additional 21, but we're short in our amnesty, so now we got to make adjustments. But when I looked at the governor's bill that he sent here on the revenue sources, he just put in the 21 million, but I go further as to where these monies are to be spent. How are this money are to be spent? And if I'm not out of order here, Mr. Chairman, the revenue sources that we're putting on, is the mic on? Or are they lowering me down? Okay, thank you. Do we go back and say, oh, look, all of these agencies from A to K, and I noticed the fonts are not all the same. One of the fonts is even smaller. Maybe it's in terms of the typeset. I'm just wondering if that was put in. But let me just try to, I'm trying to find out the revenue sources that we have to cover the next sections. Are those based on the priorities, or are they based on priorities of health, public safety, education, and revenue enhancements? At least those are the 4 cornerstones. Or are they just based that they're going to go out of, they're going to be broke? because that's where the revenue source is.
I think we're right now. We're
That's why I ask, am I going to be out of order?
Yeah, actually, what we're trying to do, Senator, we are on the revenue side.
I know,
and
I
that-
know.
And I think that is a very apropos question when
Yes.
we go to the
Very much. And you can laugh all you want over there, my good friends, because Lana, how many days we've
Yeah.
been talking about revenues.
That's-
And then I would know that I know the way budget is being done is we tie in our expenses and we get it right down to the penny in terms of our revenue sources. So the revenue sources that we're putting in terms of the budget of 2007 that is going to end in 2 months from today, and you can laugh all you want, is 2 months from today. Look at where the priorities of the expenditures are. And is that how we came to the revenue source? If it was 21 million, there's only 18 million that is being put. There's $3 million that I think is lapsed in the revenue sources. Am I not correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Somebody's very
Actually, I
simple.
guess yes, correct.
Yeah, so there's that $3 million that is, we're putting it in here rather than what you had intended to do to reduce the amount earlier in your amendment that you withdrew.
Just as a matter, Senator, just for your information, once there's been many good questions asked by members of the body. Once we've dispensed with the questions and comments, that's why I'm going to call a recess, because what the administration will present to us, of course, as they have presented to us all these numerous adjustments in both the revenue category, and that's where there was going to be after we gavelled, we're going to have a little discussion on the best ways to move forward. But continue.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know that. I guess we're going to discuss it when the cameras are.
No, actually,
okay.
we can discuss it here.
Okay, great.
Obviously,
so I'm
because
okay
you see,
then.
the issue here is once there's questions and comments
Yeah.
have been, if the senators have no further comments or questions,
On the revenue
we're still
sides.
on the revenue side. Obviously, there has to be a motion made if there are going to be any changes. It started with my proposed amendment, but obviously we wanted to go through this very deliberate discussion, which is good. I think there's been a lot of questions that have been answered, and again, that is what I think would need to occur, where there's going to have to be a motion made from the body as to whatever changes that need to be occur, and obviously many changes need to occur.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, Mr. Chairman, because you earlier had a motion to reduce the revenue source. An amendment. This is your amendment, right?
Yes, that's been pulled back.
Oh, you've pulled this back.
Pulled it back,
Yeah,
yes.
and I was asking, I wonder why would you have pulled that back when I saw only 18 million that is actually being listed, and that's why I asked ahead of time whether I'll be out of order, and that's fine. But we're still back at the $80 million of revenue sources, the amendment, as introduced by the governor.
That is all that is right now in front of the legislature. No amendments have been offered, and there's been again much discussion here this afternoon. So we're going to have to move forward in any motions, if any are put forward by the body.
Okay, so you've withdrawn that, and so right now we're going to adopt, or if there's any motion to adopt that 80 million or whatever so forth, because I wanted to go to the back after that. Because I would think that it would be, just my common sense way of thinking that the revenue source or the revenue funds that we are going to adopt must reflect some sort of an expenditure plan. If we are going to put in the budget a revenue source, as the governor had requested, is because he's going to ask on the next page to spend it in this regard. And my addition states that we have, in this bill, we would have the whole 21, but not all 21 will be spent, which may give him an additional $3 million, and we gave him a 100% transfer authority. If we adopt the $80 million. adjustment. The 21 million, the windfall. Am I?
I think what would be best maybe
Maybe
for
that's why
clarification, I'm
the-
going to allow for Ms. Duenas. Can you explain the bill? And again, if there's some statements made by Senator Shimizu, if you can maybe clarify that the number that has been proffered by the administration, I would assume you're talking about the $80 million that is the revised figure on the bill.
Correct, Mr.
So,
Chairman,
okay.
and all the time that I've been
Yeah.
listening, and I can empathize and sympathize with our good speaker when he said just earlier, and he almost went bananas trying to understand this. Bertha, I'm just a very simple way of looking at things, okay, just like a household budget. Art went and was able to bring in $21 million, and now the governor says go down to the legislature, and he's asking for a supplemental appropriation. Took that whole $21 million and put it in here, and that went from 59 to 80 million, right? That's with $21 million on top. Am I not correct?
That's correct. Yes. That's
Okay,
what-
so
that's
and
what-
then if I may, although I may be out of order, in the back page from A to K, that's $21 million worth.
No, it's 18.1.
18.1 na ginasta. Plo I ginawgo ni pinpelo gihalom. Oh, tomorrow's an official language.
Yeah.
So now, where is that floating 3 million? That would be available to the governor, because we did appropriate the source that he can use to transfer to cover any his office if he wants.
No. The 3 million, the entire 21 million is not available to spend unless this legislature authorizes.
We all know that. That's why we're here today.
Yes.
So
sir.
I have to see if I'm going to vote to authorize it or not.
Yes.
If am I going to go and authorize it based on just $18 million? And that's where I thought Senator Calvo was going to, and now I'm listening. So I'm just bringing this across. There's $21 million that Artie Lagan brought in. The governor said, great, no more furloughs. Everybody, relax, all the anxiety and all the stress that I've caused and placed upon you, is now hereby removed. But I'm going to go on and ask for $18 million worth of expenditure, but on the revenue source, I'm going to ask for 21.
Well, Senator, when the bill was when of course we came in with the supplemental, the reason the supplemental is needed is because we could not use Section 30, this windfall or residual, we might call it. We couldn't use it without legislative
I understand
authorization.
that, Bertha, I understand that, and that's where we're here today. But on the revenue sources, it's $21 million. But when I took a peek in the back, you're saying it's only 18 million. So once we adopt the $21 million on top of as a supplement, there is $80 million, and off that, there's going to be $3 million that is not been enumerated or pasalista, mano $3 million. And then on the original bill of 2902, the governor has a transfer authority.
Okay, the governor has transfer authority in 2902, but the problem that we're having is that the authorization or budgetary level in 2902 is insufficient to carry the government through the balance of the quarter.
Right, and these are the agencies that he chose in the back, A to Z, that will not have enough to last to the end of the fiscal year. And it only amounts to 18 million.
That's correct, sir.
So why are we asking for a revenue source to authorize on the revenue source 21 million?
No, we're reporting a new revenue sources that came in, and we're asking for an adjustment to that particular revenue category to the tune of what was received. We cannot only adjust based on our need. We have to adjust based on what was actually received.
Yeah, but you don't have to ask for all of it.
No, we're not asking for all of it. As
You
can
are in this one. You're asking $21 million.
Yeah, Senator, just for clarification, the number, again, obviously there's going to be many adjustments, but the revenue number that has been brought forward by the administration is just going to adjust the revenues. For whatever reasons, and I don't know what the reasons why, they did not match the expenditure appropriation, which in the second page. So, which means is, taken at face value, that they won't be able to touch that $3 million if we were to ratify it. That would be subject again to a legislative action or appropriation.
And I guess
Yeah.
I've been, I don't know how many budgets that I've gone through in the 30 years that I've been in government service, but I've always felt that when you do the revenues that we adopt, it matches and balances out a budget. This to me shows a surplus of $3 million. And he still has a transfer authority to still have access to that because we've adopted the revenue source. You've already authorized it. Food for thought. If I'm wrong and if I'm out of order, then this to me.
Actually, what I think moving forward, as we get to the expenditure side, I know there's going to be adjustments, Senator, but if whatever we agree on revenues, it may go down, it may go up, and then what we can do.
Or it may go to the rainy day fund.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So to make this a balance, then you make sure that $3 million is incorporated on the backside, and I'm therefore, for my colleagues, I am not out of order. And so you're right, it may go up and down, but still that $3 million is authorized. If we don't identify as to what to do with it, it's there. And if I go, we need to go back to 2902. If I remember correctly, I think Senator Frank Bloss had proctored the idea of giving the governor the full transfer authority. So, food for thought, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Food for thought.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Shimizu. Senator Tenorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, you and the administration have produced a lot of documents here. I'm curious, would it be difficult? I know most of these are in electronic form. Would you be able to email them so that we can more easily crunch the numbers and make sure we're not actually inputting every one of them? Your summary sheet, for example, that you produced, I'm sure you have that on Excel, or I hope you have it on Excel. And did you also produce this department agency's budget cuts, which are from the Appendix B of the 2902? No?
No.
Okay. Would you be able to provide the March, April, and May summaries that you had via
March,
email?
April, and May of which report?
The documents you gave us this morning.
Well, that's a DOA document.
Lou, would you be able to email that to the senators' offices?
I will.
Okay, and then finally, the listing that this also is produced from your office.
No, that's mine.
Could you send this as well?
Sure.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I ask.
Thank you very much. Senator Ishizaki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what a long group of people just patiently testifying before his body. And I thank you all. And I really want to commend Art Ilagan and his crew for finding this money. I know others have complimented him, but I just want to make sure we compliment him. And basically, I wanted to respond to Dr. Judy Guthard's questions regarding conflict of interest amongst government employees, federal government retirees and stuff. And Senator Guthers, for the provisions you discussed, there is no conflict. If you got a retired IRS agent who's going to even work for the federal government as a contractor, there are certain prohibitions, but I don't believe there are any conflicts. And if these people retire from federal service and decide that they want to work for a local government or a state government, there is no conflict. Kind of similar to like when you retire as a teacher or as a professor at University of Guam and then you come back as an adjunct professor, that's allowed, and these provisions are allowed. So I thank you, and thanks, folks, for your patience. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Zaki. With that, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Senator.
I'm trying to just get to Senator Shimizu's question of the revenue and what's going to happen and so forth. can you just kind of everybody think about this too? You know, in terms of trying to justify that, you know, it reminds me like there's 3 men rent a hotel room, and it's $30, and they each pay 10, and so the guy says, well, no. The front desk clerk says, no, we're going to give them at $9 each. So he gives the bellhop $5 and says, go give the guys back their money, the $5. And he goes, I can't divide that by 2, by 3 evenly. So he puts $2 in his pocket and pays each person $9. Where did the extra dollar go? If each person paid $9 and that's $27, gives them all back $3. Where did the extra dollar go?
Okay, with that, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. We're going to recess until 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. this evening. Okay? Thank you.
Senator Frank Blas Jr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I offer an amendment relative to the discussions we were having today. And
Has that been
I'm sure
passed
that
out
all-
to the body?
the body has got the copy of the amendment, and I'm just going to read the first 2 lines to replace Section 2 of the bill to read Section 2 amended revenue estimate for fiscal year 2007. And it does, it's a...
Sure. I
basic-
don't have a copy of that amendment.
You
Can
don't?
that be- Can I have a copy? Thank you very much.
I apologize, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Continue, Senator Blas.
I think for the most part, Mr. Chair, again, this is as a result of the discussions that we were having over the last couple of days, in recognizing that you know, there had to be adjustments that were being that needed to be made on the overall revenues, and this amendment basically proposes to make those adjustments in the in fiscal year 2007 budget.
Okay.
Basically amounting to a total general fund revenue of $496,261,435.
Okay. So this has been made in behalf of the administration.
Yes, sir. This is made in behalf of the administration,
So-
and so this amendment is being provided.
Okay. Senator Juan Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I guess what I think is important that if we could do, or the panel up there would do, is that to actually go down the item and explain to us, of course, that one on the left-hand side, if those are the projected figures, and then on the right-hand side, that these are actuals, right? These are not projections now. These will be actuals as of a certain date, as of June. Would that be correct?
It's actually a combination of actuals through May and projections June through September. The actuals are up to May, Senator. But what for the benefit of the body, I will go ahead and explain item by item the amendment that's in front of you. You would have to follow me with that summary sheet that was passed out that we discussed all day, and that from this I can lead you to what the amendment is showing. And just stop me if I'm going too fast.
Yes, so, Mr. Chairman. Oh, can I just go for a few second recess?
Okay, we have a few seconds, about a 2-minute recess. Ms. Duenas, please continue.
Okay.
Oh, can you turn your microphone?
Again?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Again, going to this sheet, we're going to relate this sheet with the amendment. On column F of the sheet, we're showing 54 million under individual, 54 million $232,450. In the discussions in the course of the day, it was decided that the anomalies on the bottom, specifically the additional child tax credit, was going to be restored in the individual category as opposed to it being an anomaly. And so we add 8 million to the 54 and 54 million, and that comes out to 62,232,450. I need my calculator.
Where's that? No. Oh, 64.
No, hold on.
No, 64.
She's going for her glasses.
No, her glasses.
No, my calculator. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, you better get with. Here, look at this.
Yes, the summary sheet.
Yeah, you have to go.
54,232,450 plus the 8 million ACTC additional child tax credit from rows 31 to 34 plus the additional individual tax anomaly in March 2007 on line 35, 2,001,137. Total 64,233,587, which is individual on your amendment, on the floor amendment. Do you follow?
Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, next category, we departed with corporate 71 million on in row 5, 757, 890, and we added line 36, which is 3,664,319, plus line 38, 4 million. And it equals
withholding.
No, it's just a moment. $71,757,890 plus line 36 of 3,664,319 plus 4 million in line 38 equals 79,422,209, which is your corporate category on the floor amendment. 79,422,209. Okay. Withholding. The withholding category is 160,103,941 plus line 37, 46,86465 is equal to 164,790,406. And that is on your withholding taxes, interest, and penalties on your amendment. Hold on. Provisions for refunds remains the same, which is 75,600,000. Total income tax is is therefore amended to total 232,846,202. Gross receipts tax is at 162,365,487 plus there's no anomaly that was attributed to that, so that is the number that appears on the amendment. The next item.
Can you get the microphone? I'm sorry, Senator.
No, just a quick question on the gross receipt tax. The Dave Santos Act amendment. You have the amount for that is being used as an amendment of 2,333,000. But prior to that, there was no Dave Santos amendment amount on Public Law 2902.
Yes, there is, and that is what is showing there, Senator. That
line 42.
Line, no.
No,
on the amendment.
Bloss amendment. There is no
Yes, there is.
strikeout. Is there?
When there's not a strikeover, it means that it retains what was in 2902.
Yeah, you guys prepared this, so I'm asking that. So
Yes,
I would, in my style, I would
Yes,
have
sir.
put it and it just remained the same.
Yes.
But if I see a blank, that means nothing is there. Okay?
Okay.
It's a blank.
Okay.
So blank means zero as I read it, but what you're telling me now to read it correctly is that it is 2 million.
Oh, I think.
Frank, is that correct? The 2
I'm
million?
sorry, Senator. Which are you reading off the
amendment?
Of the
Yeah,
amendment?
I'm reading off, Mr. Chairman, on the Bloss amendment, the Dave Santos Act amendment.
I think what happens in the Dave Santos Act amendment, they have 2,333,333, and because there is an agreement, there has been no change in per the worksheet that we were working on today, and what they presented. They've kept the number at 2,333,333.
So that is just a
Consistent,
presentation.
yes.
Okay, I just looked at the blank and I saw it blank. So okay, it is 2.3 million in Public Law 2902.
Yes,
Thank you.
consistent
Thank you.
with the bill.
Thank you.
Continue.
Okay. Other taxes didn't change. It's 1,911,014. Federal sources, 51 million is on the summary sheet. Is tracking is 51,909,541.
16.
Mr. Chairman, are these numbers as of May or as of the June draft, which you said that you're running those numbers right now?
This is as of May.
How come you didn't incorporate June so it'd be more accurate?
Because it's still draft, and
But-
we won't have we won't have the true June numbers until around a week or so from now.
But earlier you said that your office is pulling those numbers out. I mean, you have some kind of idea what you collected in June. I think it
Yes.
should be reflected in this. It may not change enough, but we have an opportunity here to also incorporate those collection experiences, even though they're draft. I don't know why we wouldn't reflect the most updated numbers.
I did consider that, Senator, but there's a couple of problems with including June numbers in the time constraint that we have. Number one, they are draft and they are subject to so many changes. The other part is that most of the amnesty occurred, probably most of the amnesty collected occurred in June, and because of the time constraint, again, we will be unable to extrapolate what categories of amnesty those, or even how much of collections in June is amnesty in total. So we will not be able to extrapolate in order to have a baseline that would be a baseline that would be accurate.
Then how
So
did you
it
get
would not-
$9
it would
million
not
for
be-
amnesty?
I'm sorry?
How did you get the $9 million figure for amnesty? And
We got the 9 million is an estimate of all the amnesty categories: income tax, GRT, and real property. But we don't know how much of the 9 million is, for example, income tax, how much is GRT, how much is real property. In earlier testimony, Revenue and Tax said that the earliest they could have that information is a week from now. So without that information, the projection, the tracking would then be not be accurate if we use the June numbers, because it would just not be accurate, so I hesitate to use it at this point.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Continue, Ms. Duenas.
Federal sources is 51,909,541, and that has been amended to read 73,085,290, and the difference is, of course, the 21 million. 175,749. That's down in row 44 of the summary sheet. Okay, next category is use of money and property. The tracking is 2,626,680, and that remains the same. License fees and permits is 3,455,531, and that doesn't change. Department charges one.
I'm sorry, Senator, can you get the microphone, Senator Shimizu? Senator Shimizu?
Sorry, but the last one, use of money, the 2.626, and the next one was what, use of money and property? I mean, license fees and permits? What was the amount that you called?
3,455,531.
And so there's a reduction?
I guess you overprojected. You just overprojected.
Reduction.
From the projection. From
Oh.
the projection. Yes.
Yes. There's
And this is as of May again?
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
but you haven't gotten June, so do you feel that that might be closer, that number 3.4 could be higher?
It's just a projection based on actuals as of May. June may change that number, but because we don't have June,
But there's
Yeah.
anticipation that June will
There's-
probably go because
of-
that's when a license and so forth, business
Yes.
license, and there was an increase. So there will be probably a little spike on that.
that's quite possible, Senator. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Continue, Ms. Duenas.
Okay, department charges 1,758,603. That doesn't change. Then on the second page of the amendment, additional revenues, and these are revenues revenues that were okay. The only changes under additional revenues is item 6. Real property tax amnesty in 5 million was crossed out because it's combined in the next item down, which is income tax, GRT, and real property amnesty of 9 million, which is because we're not able to quantify the different categories. We're not able yet to determine what part of the 9 million belongs to real property, so that's why it was combined.
Just put this information.
Yes, Senator Shimizu.
Deposit into general fund. Number 1, GTA cushion account / inactive funds. Can you explain that to me, Berta? Number 1. What is a cushion for GTA?
This is currently in 2902, but please, Ms. Perez, maybe we can explain.
Those are residual after all of the, based on what claims there were to the GTA settlement. There were still, I believe, some outstanding minor claims against it, and so this is after. This is clear after all of those have been settled.
So that 1.4 is just commingled in the general fund? as it stands?
This would allow us to use it for general fund appropriations.
For GTA cushion. So we're holding 1.4.
That's right. We would close that account. And
Can
then
those monies be used to pay vendors? I'm just asking a question. I mean, since it's commingled.
It's already been appropriated to fund the current fiscal year general fund appropriations.
This has been appropriated.
Yeah, this is 29.
And the previous year it was lower. I mean higher rather.
Yeah.
I think in the previous year, what funds were there went to fund the operations of the transition office. So this is the residual or left after that.
But now there's no office.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
if they're.
Yeah,
I think
tomorrow you can maybe later. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering.
Sure.
The GT has been a while. We got 1.4 million. We got things that maybe the governor. I would suggest maybe transfer. He can transfer on those monies out, right? No.
2902 with the passage of 2902. Yeah, there is a transfer authority.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator
for your
Respicio had a
patience.
comment. Again, I must remind you, this is already currently in 2902. There was no changes on this GTA cushion account and active funds and accounts. This is current what we passed in 2902. It's just a reiteration. The only changes are in those areas that there, of course, have been lined out or new lines. Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I understand what happened with the Department of Revenue and Taxation fees, but I'm just asking for the sake of clarity and consistency if the fees for the Department of Revenue and Taxation could be placed in column F, and you would have to correspondingly reduce the license fees and permits, that 34555531, because you have Guam Police Department fees, Department of Land Management fees. Then for some reason the fees that were increased for revenue and taxation pursuant to 2902, they're put into license fees and permits. I was wondering if Mr. Duenas had any objections to pulling that number out. So you're consistent with pulling out the GPD and the land management fees. It's about 2,700, right?
No, earlier I explained when we got to that portion on the summary sheet that on column E we reflected a deduction of 2.7 million under column E, but in the May tracking it appeared that some businesses may have went in for their license renewal to beat the rush in June, and it appeared that there was a spike of about 2 million close to 2 million in the month of May. So I left that intact in the month of May under column F because it seems to be tracking at the 2.7 million as opposed to, so I chose not to extrapolate that to put it under together with the other revenue enhancements as far as fees.
So you're recommending that it
It's
stay the
just
same
it's
as
a
presented?
fee category, Senator. I'm sorry. It's a fee category that just happened to be experienced in the month of May and June. And so while the others were taken out because we don't know yet what's happening with those fees, we don't have any experience with like land management fees. We can't really tell. The business license, we can tell that a lot of the activity occurs in May and June. So I did not want to extrapolate that because it's probably showing what is truly happening in that certain category.
And so you don't want to put the GPD fees and land management fees together with license fees and permits?
No, because those are a little bit more. They're more. I guess harder to.
Do you eventually, maybe for the next fiscal year, do you eventually see we'll
Yes.
see these categories fold into these
Definitely.
department charges categories or license fees and permit category?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. As a matter of fact, Senator, by the end of the quarter, we should be able to not only find out whether we achieved the projection, but we can certainly also foresee for 2008.
I have a very good amendment for this bill that would also recognize those fees, increases
Okay.
in revenue, just separated. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you very much, Senator Respicio. Continue on, Ms. Duenas.
So column number 7 is the visible GRT amendment, and the change there is 1.3 million that was and even 2 million in 2902.
Bert, excuse me.
Total general fund revenue is
No,
490.
excuse me. On number 7, you said something. The visible GRT amendment was 2 million, and now it's 1.3.
Yes.
So why is it not the 2 million there?
Are we in the visible GRT?
Yes.
I'm going to take. There's a technical issue here. I'm going to just take a couple of minutes recess.
Thank you.
Senator Shimizu. Senator Guthards.
Some of those funds were appropriated to the university, and $25,000 of those funds was appropriated for the Modernization Commission. The visible funds, the visible GRT. Remember, Senator Pangleen introduced the bill, the amendment, $500,000 to the university. And of the $500,000, $25,000 was supposed to go to the university to fund the Secretariat for the Modernization Commission. Huh? Yeah, but what are they doing with these funds here? Yeah, but you're saying it's less money. Less revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, folks, I know there was some appropriations made based on the repeal of the visible GRT, but with the additional funds, there was an appropriation from the increase of $2 million based on the 471. You have some very valid questions, but I think obviously with the new numbers being put forth, we're not looking at a 471 revenue number, but going up to 496. So with that, obviously I think they're more technical in nature. Some amendments that can be made, but again, maybe Bertha can further explain this. But I think when it comes to some of your concerns, Senator Guthards, obviously those concerns will be addressed based on there was an appropriation, and though we had an increase in revenues as a result of the elimination of the GRT, that appropriation was based on 471, and we're not canceling out that appropriation. I think you're okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, because we don't want to hurt the university.
Yes.
Or this other project, the commission project.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Wanpat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is that when we look at page 1, we were scratching out, of course, the amounts that were being projected versus what was actual and then what was going to be projected up to September. So with the visible GRT amendment, what it was the discussion was 2 million. So I'm wondering whether 2 million should have been placed there, strike that
Actually,
out,
I think that's
and then go 1,300.
Great idea.
You're
that will
correct.
solve the whole problem.
Because that's
So
my understanding.
would you like to make a I think that's all that's necessary. If you can get the $2 million there written and strike it, it would be very clear the change in the dollar figure on the revenues that were originally appropriated.
I just want to make sure that is the correct amount.
Yes,
because
it is.
The sheet that I'm looking at here does not reflect that.
It was actually a technical error. The 2 million is supposed to show in front of that 1.3 and then lined out for a replacement. It was just a typo.
Right.
Yeah, because you see, Senator Shimizu was brought up that same situation here where you've indicated, like for licenses and department charges, that the dollar amounts there are stricken with the new amounts, which are less.
Senator, I think you have the answer to that was the solution right there. I think someone needs to just make a motion for the for the adding of the 2 million, and then the strike with that adding of 2 million, the striking out of that 2 million in that particular area, and putting the 1.3 million.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, then.
So moved.
Yeah, so.
Okay, no objection. Okay, we'll
yes.
make that technical change. Okay, continue, Ms. Duenas.
Okay, for total general fund revenue of 496,261,435. On the rest of the page did not. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No changes on special fund revenues, and then the next page, federal matching grant and aids, also no change. Down at the revenue summary, we now have a total general fund summary, revenue summary of 496,261,435. That was the only change. And then, of course, the grand total changed to 631,131,611. I'm sorry, 121,611. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And again, on the motion, if there's no objection, okay. Amendment carries. Folks, we're going to recess until 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I think I want everyone to have a good night's sleep. So 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.